Chapter 222. Everyone in the prince's residence knew about Jean Eyre and Deju's quarrel the next day. This pair of daughter and daughter were originally quarrelsome lovers, so a quarrel was not a big deal. However, it was different this time. Jean Eyre bullied Deju until she cried, so the entire prince's residence was in an uproar. The members of the embroidered uniform guards were all on Lu Zhu's side. Lu Zhu had a sweet mouth but a kind heart. She was usually very likable. Jean Eyre was a man after all. If he bullied a little girl like Lu Zhu until she cried, it would definitely be his fault. Naturally, Butler Lin was enraged again. He dragged Jean Eyre over and interrogated him for a long time. Even Yi Feng and Jean Wen talked to Jean Eyre for an unprecedented hour. Unfortunately, Jean Eyre remained silent from beginning to end and had no idea where to start. Everyone gradually began to worry about Dewdrop. However, Dewdrop was doing things as usual with a smile on her face. She seemed to be completely unaffected by this matter. However, the more Dewdrop acted like this, the more everyone believed that she had been wronged. This made their hearts ache even more. Although Jiang Yuan did not like what Jean Eyre had said, it was indeed not appropriate for her to intervene in the affairs of her own subordinates. Lu Zhu had also repeatedly expressed that she did not need to worry about this matter. Jiang Yuan did not know what else to say. That afternoon, Lu Zhu came over to discuss some matters with Jiang Yuan. Auntie Zhang, who was in charge of purchasing, had left the Fu to look after her daughter-in-law, who was in charge of purchasing, as her daughter-in-law was pregnant and the fetus was affected. Thus, Lu Zhu wanted to personally go shopping. Seeing this, Lian Qiao said, yes, Nubi also wants to buy some things. Why don't Nubi go with Lu Zhu? Later on, we can also buy some snacks from Jade Zhai for young madam. Tian Zhu glanced at Dewdrop and did not speak. Jiang Yuan understood. She thought that if she let Dewdrop and Lian Qiao go out, perhaps Dewdrop's mood would be better, so she agreed. After Lu Zhu and Lian Qiao left, Jiang Yuan looked at the account book in front of her and suddenly asked Tian Zhu, who was standing to one side, what happened to Jean Eyre. Tian Zhu was slightly taken aback, and then a slightly embarrassed expression appeared on her face. I don't know either. You don't know either. Jiang Yuan was somewhat flabbergasted. She immediately lowered her head and looked at the teacup in front of her as if deep in thought, this is rather strange. The streets of the capital were still very lively. The festivities brought about by the new year had not yet subsided. Some of the shops had not taken down their red lanterns, probably for good luck. In order to sell more things during this bustling time, the street vendors brought out countless novelty gadgets. Lian Qiao and Lu Zhu were maidservants of the Wang Fu, so Jiang Yuan did not have a rule that forbade them from going out. However, there were many matters to attend to on a daily basis. Occasionally, they would go out to the palace or to other mansions. Most of the time, they would take a horse carriage. It was rare for them to have the opportunity to casually walk on the main street. What's more, on the surface, it was a purchase, but in fact, everyone knew that this was a special opportunity for Dewdrop to relax. Hence, Lian Qiao was not in a hurry to go to the shop to buy clothes. Instead, she pulled Lu Zhu along as they strolled leisurely on the street. Ever since Lu Zhu and Jean Eyre quarreled, Jean Eyre did not apologize to Lu Zhu. Instead, the two of them continued to fight coldly. This was very unusual. Although Lu Zhu did not say it, anyone with a discerning eye would know that Lu Zhu was definitely very upset. Along the way, Lian Qiao pulled Lu Zhu along and told her about the recent happenings in the capital, hoping to cheer her up a little. Although Lu Zhu was smiling, Lian Qiao had been with her for a long time. With one glance, she could tell that Lu Zhu's smile was also very forced. Immediately, Lian Qiao was at a loss as to what to do. As the two of them walked like this, Lu Zhu was not very interested. This was very rare for her, who was usually the most interested in novelty. Lian Xiao accompanied her in her sadness, but she could not help. Just when she was at a loss of what to do, she inadvertently saw a shop that sold sugar figurines. She pulled Lu Zhu with a smile and said, "Look, there's a shop selling sugar figurines. Let's go take a look." Lu Zhu was usually a glutton and loved these novelty gadgets. She had once worked as a waiter for an old man who sold sugar figurines. When she saw the sugar figurines, she felt very close to them and unconsciously smiled. Lian Xiao heaved a sigh of relief and pulled her forward. Sure enough, they saw a straw pillar in front of the person who set up the stall. On top of the pillar, there were all kinds of lifelike sugar figurines of various sizes. The sugar figurines gave off a fragrant and sweet smell. Lu Zhu smiled and took out a few copper coins from her sleeve. She said to the old man who made the sugar figurines, "Master, make me a guangong." The sugar figurine master heard this and smiled. He said, "Sure." Then, he started to boil the sugar again. Lian Xiao saw that Lu Zhu seemed to have forgotten about the matter just now. She was slightly happy and said, "I also want a Chang E1." The sugar figurine master started to get busy. Out of boredom, Lian Xiao looked around her surroundings. When she saw a medicine shop, she suddenly froze. Caught off guard, she called out, "What?" Just as the words left her mouth, she suddenly realized something and quickly shut her mouth. Only Dewdrop still heard her and asked curiously, "What happened to you?" Lu Zhu followed Lian Xiao's gaze. Lian Xiao wanted to stop her, but it was too late. She saw Lu Zhu also froze on the spot. In an instant, her face became very pale. In the medicine shop in front, there was a short and plump woman talking to the shop's waiter. They were probably getting medicine. Behind the woman was a young lady. The young lady was wearing a moon-white embroidered orchid dress. She had a delicate and elegant appearance. With one look, one could tell that she was a young lady from a wealthy family. At this moment, she was talking to a young man beside her. The young man was handsome and had a slight smile on his face. When he turned around, he lowered his head slightly. The two of them seemed to be very close. That man was not a stranger to Lian Xiao and Lu Zhu. It was Jean Eyre. The short and plump woman took the medicine and said something to Jean Eyre. Jean Eyre smiled and the three of them left the medicine shop together. Lian Xiao knew that this was not good. Just as she was thinking about how to comfort Lu Zhu, she saw Lu Zhu's expression change and she suddenly rushed out. Just as the young lady and Jean Eyre left the medicine shop, they were suddenly blocked by Lu Zhu. Lu Zhu had a straightforward temperament and was never one who was used to forbearing. The lady was a little surprised at first and then asked, "Miss, why are you blocking in front of us?" Lu Zhu ignored the lady's words and only looked at Jean Eyre coldly. She said, "Now you won't say that I am being unreasonable." After Jean Eyre's shock subsided, he said in shock, "You have misunderstood. She and I don't care what relationship you have with her." Lu Zhu interrupted him loudly. She took a deep breath and said, "I'll have to trouble you to explain to His Highness. Just treat the marriage between you and me as a joke. Just treat the previous incident as if it never happened." "How can you say that? I already said it was a misunderstanding." Jean Eyre frowned. The lady at the side seemed to have noticed something and quickly said softly, "Miss, you have misunderstood. Second young master is only, what does the matter between the two of us have to do with you?" Lu Zhu turned her head and interrupted the lady's words. She had grown up in the streets and when she was angry, she did not care about anything. Her voice also became louder. It was the first time that the lady had met such a fierce person. She was startled and started coughing violently. The short and plump lady at the side quickly squeezed Lu Zhu to the side and said hurriedly, "Miss, are you all right?" "Ah, miss, your body has just gotten better. It's not easy for you to go out today. Don't let your old illness come back." Seeing this, Jean Eyre helped the lady up and asked, is Miss Liao all right? The lady shook her head and said, she's fine. I was careless. When Jin Air turned his head again, his attitude towards Lu Zhu was a little stiff. Quickly apologized to Miss Liao. Apologize for what? Lu Zhu was unable to restrain her anger. Upon hearing this, she wished that she could tear Jin Air into pieces. That so-called Miss Liao was beautiful and polite. The more she thought about it, the more flustered she felt. However, she had to force back her tears. She sneered and asked, I don't even know what I've done wrong and I still have to apologize. Jin Air said angrily, you're still being unreasonable. How did you speak to her just now? Then how should I speak? Lu Zhu roared. Forget it, forget it. The lady hurriedly comforted, this lady did not mean it. Moreover, I am not hurt. Second young master does not have to do this for me. Your body has just recovered and you are already suffering such grievances. Moreover, she was rude in the first place. Jin Air helped the lady up and said, I am really sorry to have startled you. Dewdrop sneered, this is really strange. Could it be that I made her cough? This sickly body is also thanks to me. I didn't even know when I had such an ability. Even such a sin is placed on me. Before he could finish his sentence, he heard a crisp pa sound. Lian Xiao, who had just run over, was shocked. Without saying anything, she shielded Dewdrop behind her and said angrily, Jin Air, what are you trying to do? Jin Air stared blankly at his own hand, as if he could not believe that he was the one who had slapped Lu Zhu. Lu Zhu, who was being pulled behind Lian Xiao, was also in slight disbelief. She had originally said those words in a moment of anger. She was used to speaking straightforwardly and harbored enmity towards this lady. After she finished speaking, she felt some regret in her heart. She thought that she had said the wrong thing, but she did not expect that Jin Air would actually do it for that lady. Hit her. The lady's expression was originally somewhat gloomy, but upon seeing the situation, she became somewhat flustered. She said, Lady, second young master, sigh, you. Lian Xiao was filled with regret. Today, she had originally brought Lu Zhu along to relax, but she did not expect to encounter such an incident. Now, Lu Zhu could be considered to be truly heartbroken. She naturally stood on Lu Zhu's side and shared the same hatred for the enemy. Her gaze towards Jin Air was somewhat unfriendly. Just as she was about to throw out a few harsh words, Lu Zhu unexpectedly stood out from behind her. From the beginning until now, Lu Zhu had tried her best to control her emotions and did not shed a single tear. Even when Jin Air had slapped her, she still did not shed a single tear. At this moment, she seemed to have calmed down from her previous disbelief. She looked at Jin Air and said indifferently, very well, today, we can consider that we have nothing to do with each other. She then turned around and left, with Lian Xiao hurriedly following after her. Lu Zhu walked extremely quickly as she followed Jiang Ruan. Her usual manner and mannerisms were somewhat similar to Jiang Ruan's. The more one admired a person in one's heart, the more one would involuntarily imitate their actions. If Jiang Ruan were to encounter such a situation, she would most likely also strive for justice. After Lu Zhu and Lian Xiao left, Jin Air was about to chase after them when the short and plump woman beside him cried out in alarm, "Oh my lady, why is your complexion so pale? Could it be that your old illness has relapsed? Does lady feel well?" When Jin Air heard these words, he hesitated for a moment before he finally put down his raised feet. He walked to the woman's side and said, "Your complexion indeed does not look well. How about this, I will call for a physician. First, return to the residence to rest and let the physician take a look." When Lu Zhu returned to the Jiangfu, she returned to her own room without saying a word. Lian Xiao consoled her with a few words and thought that this matter could not be known by others. After all, there could be some misunderstanding. However, she should still inform Jiang Ruan, so she went to the study on her own. Jiang Yuan was in the middle of giving instructions to Tianzhu when she saw that Lian Xiao had returned. She said, "Why are you back so early?" Since she had sent the two of them out to relieve their boredom, there was absolutely no reason for them to return so quickly. Lian Xiao was both embarrassed and angry. Before Lu Zhu could voice her grievances, she said, "Young Furen, Nubi was unable to complete the task of purchasing." Jiang Yuan looked at her and asked, "What happened?" Lian Xiao had a bellyful of pent-up anger, so she immediately recounted the sequence of events. Previously, when she had seen Lu Zhu and Jin Air in a cold war, Lian Xiao had thought that there must have been some misunderstanding. Perhaps Lu Zhu had wrongly accused Jin Air. However, now that she had personally witnessed Jin Air's actions, Lu Zhu could no longer stand on Jin Air's side. After she finished narrating the matter, she said, "No wonder Elder Jin Air was not in the Fu. It was clearly not some prince who had ordered him to do something." When Lu Zhu said that Jin Air had someone outside, Nubi did not believe her. Now, it is clear that Jin Air had long been hiding a mistress outside. Bah, what a waste of such a good lady like Lu Zhu. After Jiang Yuan heard Lian Xiao finish narrating the origin of the matter, she was also somewhat surprised. She frowned and asked, "What is the background of that Miss Liao?" Lu Zhu shook her head and said, "I couldn't tell. She looked educated and reasonable, like a young lady raised by a wealthy family. I don't know why she had the face to do such a shady business, seducing a man who was already married for no reason at all." After following Jiang Yuan for so long, Lian Xiao had seen many people like Jiang Su Su and Jiang Dan who were used to acting gentle on the surface. Lian Xiao already had a prejudice against this type of woman. Coupled with the fact that she had bullied her own sister, Lian Xiao wished that she had gone up and kicked that woman twice. "Jin Air is not this kind of person," Tianzhu suddenly said. Seeing Lian Xiao and Jiang Yuan look over, she said seriously, "Although Jin Air's temperament is stubborn and mischievous, and he appears to be unruly on the surface, in reality, he is not a reckless person. Since he is engaged to Lu Zhu, he will not go and provoke others." Tianzhu was usually cold and indifferent, and this was the first time that she had spoken up for Jin Air. However, Lian Xiao did not listen to her and said, "Tianzhu, you don't know this. After all, you are a woman, and Jin Air is a man. Going from east to west, returning to the west at dusk, making love in the daytime. Ordinary men are unfaithful and heartless, but their way of thinking is different from that of women. Moreover, you did not see the scene today. Jin Air actually hit Lu Zhu for a woman. If it was really a misunderstanding, why would he hit his fiancée for another woman? Even if you said that there was no special relationship between the two of them, I'm afraid that no one would believe it." Lian Xiao's words were understandable, so Tianzhu had nothing else to say. Jiang Yuan frowned. She did not lose her sense of propriety because of Lian Xiao's words. Even though she was unhappy on behalf of Lu Zhu, she still noticed that something was amiss. She said, "Why would there be another woman out of the blue? Tianzhu, think of a way to investigate the background of that woman. She actually dared to come so brazenly to snatch people from my people. She's a little too daring." Tianzhu complied and left. After Tianzhu left, Lian Xiao, who was full of grievances, could not help but ask, "Miss still believes that there is nothing wrong with Jin Air. Did Lu Zhu misunderstand? But this servant still feels that that woman is very hateful. Even an ordinary woman knows to keep a distance from a man with a family. Moreover, that person looks like a daughter of a noble family and knows the rules. How could she be so casual? Since you can see that the woman has ulterior motives, how can I not see it?" Jiang Yuan's gaze darkened as she said, "She actually used this method on my people. Very well, I also want to know who is causing trouble." She was all too familiar with this woman's methods. In her previous life in the palace, the women in the inner palace had many methods to compete for favor. These methods could not be considered very brilliant, but they almost always won. This was because men instinctively had tender feelings for the fairer sex. Once they saw the weaker party, they would definitely think of ways to take pity on them. Lu Zhu was straightforward, so it would not be advantageous to cross swords with such a woman. It would only irritate Jin Er. However, Jin Er and Lu Zhu were Jin Yingwang's people after all. Who would have the guts to pick him? Jiang Wan lowered her eyes and calmly took a sip of tea. That night, Lian Xiao, who had been waiting to denounce Jin Er, guarded the door to Jin Er's room. Even Yi Feng, who came over to inquire, was scolded by her, causing Yi Feng to scratch his head in confusion. Unfortunately, that night, Jin Er did not return to the Fu. Lian Xiao was so angry that she almost wanted to tear Jin Er's room apart. In the end, Yi Feng tried every possible way to persuade Lian Xiao to return, but she had no choice but to give up. The next day, the weather was clear. Sunlight shone into the room through the window. It was a small room that was decorated neatly and elegantly. Although it was not very luxurious, it was still considered spacious. There was a faint fragrance of orchids in the air that made one feel comfortable. There was a man lying on the soft couch, and he was already sleeping soundly. After an unknown period of time, he woke up around the time the sunlight climbed onto his face. His clothes still carried a faint smell of alcohol. When he moved, the smell of alcohol immediately became a little stronger. Jin Er woke up the moment he opened his eyes. He sat up abruptly and saw a woman in disheveled clothes curled up in a corner of the soft couch. The woman covered her mouth, but she could not stop her soft sobs. Each sob was like a sudden clap of thunder that struck Jin Er's heart. At this moment, the door was suddenly pushed open. Zhou Mama walked in and said, "Miss, breakfast." Her voice stopped abruptly. She was stunned for a moment, as if she had been frightened. Then, she immediately turned around and ran out in silence, closing the door tightly behind her. However, the woman seemed to have finally snapped the last string in her brain. Her soft sobs suddenly became louder and she burst into tears. The dazed Jin Er came back to his senses. In his mind, there were only a few fragments from last night. He only remembered that after the Du left last night, he sent Liao Meng back to the Fu to find a doctor to take a look at her body. Later, his mood was really bad, so he went to a pub to drink. Who knew that he would be pulled back by Liao Meng midway? Liao Meng had just arrived in the capital and did not know where Jin Yingwang Fu was, so she could only bring him back to the house that she temporarily lived in. After that, he did not remember what happened after that. However, right now, Jin Er looked at the wrinkled bedsheet and his heart jumped. Then, he saw the stains on the bedsheet and he could already guess what happened. "Miss Liao." He opened his mouth with difficulty. You don't have to say anything. Today, I will set off for Jiangnan. This time, we will pretend that we have never seen each other. This matter will be treated as if it never happened. Liao Meng finally stopped sobbing. After saying this, tears flowed out uncontrollably. As soon as she finished speaking, without waiting for Jin Er to reply, a figure suddenly rushed in from outside. It was no other person but Mother Zhou. As soon as she came in, she knelt straight in front of Liao Meng and cried, "Miss, why do you have to do this? If this is really the case, how do you want this old servant to explain to the deceased master and Furen?" She looked at Jin Er and kowtowed to Jin Er several times in one breath. She kowtowed so hard that her head started to bleed. Madame Zhou choked with sobs, "Second young master, this old servant is begging you. Please give our young lady a way out. After such a thing happened, how can Miss marry in the future? Even if she marries, how can she live well in other people's homes? With Mrs. Temper, if she does not say it now, I'm afraid that she will commit suicide after returning to the Fu. This old servant promised master and Furen that I will raise Miss well. After such a thing happened, this old servant cannot absolve myself from the blame. Why don't second young master punish this old servant? This old servant is willing to use my life to exchange for Mrs. Way Out. Mother Zhou, what are you saying? Liao Meng also cried. As she cried, she said, what does this matter have to do with you? Don't say such words to hurt my heart. This matter has nothing to do with second young master. This is all a misunderstanding. My miss, how is this a misunderstanding? Mother Zhou cried even sadder than Liao Meng, you are my child who was raised by me. How can this old servant not know Mrs. Temper? Second young master, this old servant is begging you. I beg you to give our miss a way out. This old servant knows that second young master has a sweetheart, but that girl has a good appearance and was raised by Wang Fei. Without second young master, she will definitely be able to marry into a good family in the future, but if our miss leaves you, how will she marry? She cannot be compared to the miss by the princess's side. It's all this old servant's fault. It's all this old servant's fault for not taking good care of her. Second young master, look at our Mississippi. She is gentle and well educated. Second young master will definitely like her. The master and the servant cried and talked at the same time. They were fighting to take the responsibility for themselves. Jin Air looked at Mother Zhou and Liao Meng in front of him in a trance. His mind was in a mess. His fingers suddenly touched something on his waist. He gradually woke up. It was a small sachet that Dezhu sewed for him. There were 2 small goldfish embroidered on it. It was very delicate and cute. He paused and slowly reached out to untie the sachet. He looked at Liao Meng and took a deep breath. He closed his eyes and said, this is all my fault. I take responsibility. I will immediately explain to mother and propose marriage to the Liao family. Chapter 223. There was a warning tone to her words. Her meaning was that if Jin Air really decided to cancel his engagement with Lu Zhu today, from then on, Jiang Ruan would never allow him to get close to Lu Zhu again. When Jin Air heard these words, he slowly lowered his head and fished out something from his sleeve. He clenched his fist and extended it in front of Lu Zhu. Liao Meng smiled, mother worries too much. That second young master Huang is clever and quick-witted. If not for his own reputation, how could he agree to this matter so easily? As for after the marriage, she seemed a little shy, I will be a good wife. Second young master is a good person and will live well with me. Naturally, these matters will not be investigated by others. Mother, do you think that my methods are too sinister? Liao Meng lowered her head and her voice became a little sad, father and mother are already gone and those relatives are so covetous towards me. I have no other choice. If I miss out on a family like the Huang family, uncle and aunt will definitely marry me to the son of a rice merchant as a concubine. Mother, I don't want to be a concubine. That servant girl, since she is by the princess's side, she can always find a better one. Lian Qiao's eyes immediately reddened. Bai Ji and Lu Zhu had supported each other from the most difficult days. Lu Zhu was naturally naive and unaffected, so she also treated Lu Zhu as her own little sister. She saw with her own eyes how happy Dezhu was when she found out about the marriage, but now she heard from Jin Air's mouth that the marriage was cancelled. She felt sad for Dezhu and felt that it was not worth it. She wished she could go up and give Jin Air a good beating. She said, you have no conscience. Replying to young madam, I have investigated, but... She hesitated and heard Jiang Ruan say, tell me when you have. It was rare for Jiang Ruan to be so cold and stern. Clearly, the matter with Lu Zhu had made her very unhappy. Tian Zhu did not dare to hide it and immediately said it. However, this little bit of guilt was not enough to completely break the relationship between the two. Liao Meng slowly smiled and caressed the face of the woman in the bronze mirror. Does mother feel that something is wrong? Liao Meng smiled slightly. Compared to the panic in the morning, she now appeared very calm. If one looked carefully, one could even see a hint of happiness in the corners of her eyes. "Young madam, this subordinate cannot marry Lu Zhu." Jin Eyre repeated himself. This time, his voice was firm and it rang clearly in everyone's ears. The marriage between Jin Eyre and Lu Zhu fell through and caused quite a storm in Jinying Wangfu. On that day, the entire Wangfu was lifeless, as if it had sunk into trouble because of this matter. No one had thought that this was just the beginning. Ever since this matter, great waves surged up one after another in Jinying Wangfu. After Jin Eyre and Lu Zhu left, Lian Xiao finally wiped her tears. Lu Zhu was wronged, so she cried fiercely and said, "This is too much, young mistress." On the other hand, Jin Eyre's expression was extremely ugly. Seeing this, Steward Lin only thought that Jin Eyre was feeling remorseful and guilty, so he did not know what to say. Jin Eyre's footsteps were swift and he left Steward Lin behind. Jin San and Jin Si surrounded him and looked at Jin Eyre with a baffled expression. Steward Lin sighed, "What is this all about?" Outside the door, Steward Lin and Jin San and Jin Si could not bear to watch and closed their eyes. They thought to themselves that Lian Xiao's glib tongue was really sharp. It was better not to provoke anyone but her. However, Lian Xiao's words seemed to have a different meaning. A young lady from a wealthy family? Who was she mocking? Could it be that Jin Eyre really had a lover outside? What's the matter? Lian Xiao stood up and asked. However, Jin Eyre's expression was even uglier than Steward Lin's and he seemed to be extremely exhausted. Steward Lin talked to him for almost an hour, but Jin Eyre's muddled gaze gradually became sober. He did not say anything and only glanced at Steward Lin before walking towards the study. Steward Lin was stunned for a moment and said, "Master has not returned to the Fu yet. Young madam is inside." Lu Zhu took it. It was a small sachet with a goldfish pattern embroidered on it. She had wanted to obtain a good omen of a golden marriage, but now that the item had returned to its rightful owner, it had also cut off the last trace of hope between the two of them. Lu Zhu's eyes were still somewhat sparkling, but she quickly concealed her loss of composure with a smile. She kowtowed to Jiang Yuan and said with a smile, "Thank you, young madam, for fulfilling my wish. Why did you suddenly break off the engagement? Isn't it because you want to marry someone else?" Jiang Yuan said coldly, "What exactly happened last night? Tianzhu, go and investigate." Tianzhu could not see it because what the embroidered uniform guards did had nothing to do with the fight between the women in the courtyard. However, men could not see through a woman's hypocrisy, only a woman could. Even Lian Xiao, who had been by her side for a long time, could see that something was wrong. This woman's scheming was quite deep. Step by step, she had led Jin Eyre to this point. It was clear that it had been premeditated. In the end, she had become Lu Zhu's unreasonable troublemaker, completely removing herself from the matter. Lian Xiao had long hated that woman to the point of gnashing her teeth. Hearing this, she asked happily, "Does young madam want to vent Lu Zhu's anger?" Today, Jiang Yuan did not let Lu Zhu wait on her. A fine young lady had cried until her eyes were swollen like peaches. Moreover, she was at the age of a flower, so her self-esteem was very heavy. After such a thing had happened, she felt very ashamed. How could she still walk around the Fu as if nothing had happened? Thus, only Tianzhu and Lian Xiao remained in the room. When she heard that Jin Eyre had arrived, Lian Xiao rolled her eyes in disdain. However, Jiang Yuan acted as if she did not hear it and continued to write. She was deliberately giving Jin Eyre the cold shoulder. Jiang Yuan was writing in the study when she suddenly heard someone knock on the door. Tianzhu glanced at it and said in a low voice, "Young madam, it's Jin Eyre." Jiang Yuan slowly picked up her teacup and took a sip. Among everyone present, only her expression was the calmest. She looked coldly at Jin Eyre. Her gaze was actually somewhat similar to Xiao Xiao's. She asked, "Why?" Jiang Yuan quietly looked at Lu Zhu for a long time before saying, Lu Zhu, don't try to coax me." She spoke so solemnly that Lien Xiao wanted to speak up to stop her. After all, marriage was not a small matter that could be used in a fit of pique. However, on second thought, Jin Eyre was such a heartless person. How could she persuade him? It would be better if she did not speak up. The woman who had come to the capital to look for Jin Eyre was called Liao Meng. Before Jin Eyre followed Xiao Xiao, he was the second young master of the Huang family in Jiangnan. When old master Huang passed by Dingxi, he had a period of fate with the Liao family in Dingxi. At that time, Huang Furen had just given birth to Jin Eyre, and Liao Madam had also given birth to Liao Meng. Feeling that it was fate, it just so happened that old master Huang and old master Liao had gotten drunk that day. Thus, they had decided on a child betrothal. However, later on, old master Huang had returned to Jiangnan and had forgotten about this matter. For more than 20 years, they had not had any contact. Who knew that Liao Meng would suddenly come knocking on their door? "The marriage between you and Lu Zhu must be discussed between the two of you. Does Lu Zhu know about your actions? Does she agree to it?" Jiang Ruan's tone was gentle, but her gaze was incomparably sharp. Jin Eyre met her gaze, but for a moment, he did not know how to respond. Just as he was silent, he heard a clear and melodious voice coming from behind him, "Of course, I know." Jin Eyre kowtowed to Jiang Ruan and said in a heavy tone, "It is this subordinate who has wronged Lu Zhu. This marriage, let's forget about it." Jin Eyre half knelt, lowered his head and said, "This subordinate has sinned. Master, please punish me." She slowly sat down in front of the dressing mirror. The woman in the mirror had the countenance of a flower and the countenance of the moon. With one look, one could tell that she was the daughter of a noble family who had been pampered. If one did not look out for oneself, heaven and earth would destroy them. If her parents were still alive, she indeed would not be so obsessed with Jin Eyre. However, now that things had come to this, a family like the Huang family would not be able to get another chance. Moreover, Jin Eyre was born into a good family, so she was even more determined to win him over. Jin Eyre allowed Lu Zhu to scold him, but he did not utter a single word. Steward Lin stroked his beard and said in a rather gratified manner, "Not retaliating when hit, not retaliating when scolded, at least this attitude is good. Women are always soft-hearted. If only I had taken the opportunity to say a few good words to coax her." It turned out that the Liao family had met with an unforeseen event. Master Liao and Liao Furen had both passed away, and various relatives of the Liao family coveted the Liao family's assets. Before Liao Furen had left, she had taken out the marriage contract and asked Liao Meng to come and seek refuge with the Huang family. Old Master Huang was a person who paid great attention to his promises, but Huang Furen was worried that her son would rashly marry another girl. Coincidentally, Liao Meng's health was not good, so she wanted to come to the capital to find a famous doctor to take a look at her body. At the same time, she wanted to clarify this matter with Jin Eyre. If Jin Eyre did not agree, the matter would be dropped. That Zhou Mama was Liao Meng's wet nurse and also came to the capital as soon as they arrived. Tian Zhu was still a little hesitant. She had always been familiar with Jin Eyre's temperament. Up until now, she indeed could not see anything wrong with what that woman had done. In fact, she could even be said to be reasonable. So how did things turn out this way? How could a lowly servant girl by the side of a Wangfei compare to a proper young miss from a large family like her? Against such an opponent, she only needed to use a few tricks to determine the outcome. She had long known from Jin Eyre that this Lu Zhu's personality was one that could not tolerate others. The more reasonable she was, the more guilty Jin Eyre felt. Sometimes, he would instigate discord without batting an eyelid. Little by little, it would eventually lead to a break between the two of them. Jin Eyre's expression was ashen. In an instant it was as if he had lost everything he could rely on. His gaze was even somewhat lifeless, and there was no trace of his usual romantic and handsome appearance. Steward Lin sighed, did not say anything, and turned to leave. Jean San and Jean Si were somewhat at a loss. They had originally thought that Jean Eyre had only returned to the Fu today to admit his wrongs, and in the end, the two of them would be on good terms. Who knew that such a situation would occur? Both of their expressions gradually became grave. It was too unusual for Jean Eyre to suddenly propose to break off the engagement. There was silence. Everyone, including Tianzhu, suddenly looked towards Jean Eyre. Steward Lin opened his mouth, but for a moment, he was speechless and did not know what to do. Lian Xiao placed her hand on her chest and took a deep breath. She said, "Don't say these words to scare people, you. Sai, let's follow them and take a look. I'm afraid that Jean Eyre has also lost his head for a moment." Steward Lin sighed and followed. This servant does not dare to deceive young Furen. Lu Zhu said calmly. Her expression was magnanimous and her tone was crisp, somewhat similar to Jiang Ruan when she encountered trouble. She said, "This servant's previous marriage was all thanks to young Furen's help. Now that our relationship has ended, naturally, we should part on good terms. Since Jean Eyre has taken the initiative to propose it, it just happens to go along with this servant's wishes. This is precisely the principle of parting on good terms. It's just that to ask young Furen to fulfill this request again, this servant is terrified. This matter has nothing to do with Jean Eyre. It's just that this servant and he do not have the affection of husband and wife. Young Furen, this subordinate cannot marry Lu Zhu." Without waiting for Steward Lin to finish speaking, Jean Eyre's voice rang out in the room. On the afternoon of the second day, Jean Eyre finally entered the Fu under the watchful eyes of everyone. When Steward Lin saw him return, he was so angry that he stomped his feet. Although he did not know what had happened, for a young lady like Lu Zhu, who was always smiling, to stay in the room and shed tears for a whole night, Jean Eyre was really too much of a bastard this time. Although Lian Xiao did not say anything, the handprint on Lu Zhu's face was obvious to everyone. Those with discerning eyes could always guess what had happened. Although it was somewhat unbelievable, they could not help but think about it. So when Jean Eyre returned, Steward Lin immediately spilled out the words that he had kept to himself for the whole night. Tianzhu said, when that young Miss Liao first came to the capital, she met Jean Eyre once. Jean Eyre also explained clearly that he was already engaged to Lu Zhu. Young Miss Liao was also very understanding. However, the physician here said that it was not advisable to travel on a long journey, so young Miss Liao said that she would return to Jiangnan after she had recovered. When Zhou Mama heard this, she was extremely distressed and said, "My miss, do not say such words that make people sad. If Master and Furen were still here, why would they allow Miss to use your own reputation as a prelude? This old servant knows that Miss has no choice. That second young Master Huang is also a man. After Miss and second young Master get married, with Miss temperament and appearance, no man would dislike you. Naturally, your days will get better and better. This old servant has thought too much. Young Miss, please do not blame me." Tianzhu also looked towards the door and saw Lu Zhu walking in from outside. She had changed into a clean set of clothes and the delicate pink color made her complexion look brighter. Her eyes were still slightly red and swollen under the disguise of makeup, but her expression was incomparably calm. She walked in and knelt down by Jean Eyre's side. She kowtowed to Jiang Ruan and said, "This servant earnestly requests young Furen to cancel the engagement with Jean Eyre." The servant girl stopped abruptly, looked at Lu Zhu, and shut her mouth. Immediately, Lian Xiao was alarmed. She pretended to unintentionally walk over and pull the young servant girl up, saying, "I will go out with you to take a look. Lu Zhu, help me look after the embroidered handkerchief." Lian Xiao turned her head away, but she could not stop her tears from falling. If an ordinary person saw this, one could imagine what Lu Zhu was thinking. Jiang Ruan said indifferently, "All right, as you wish." She then looked at Jean Eyre and said indifferently, I hope that you will not regret it in the future. Although her words were gentle, each and every one of them was unyielding, and there was not the slightest bit of leeway in her words. Jiang Yuan lowered her eyes so that no one could see her gaze clearly. She only slowly touched the lid of the white porcelain teacup and said, "Since the two of you have already discussed it, I naturally have no room to say anything else." However, after this engagement was cancelled, just as Lu Zhu said, there is no longer any fate between husband and wife. Everything that happened in the past is just an illusion, and from then on, you will be strangers, each getting married and having children. In the future, when you think about it in your old age, it will just be a joke. Her words were cold and cruel, causing the hearts of those present to tremble involuntarily. Yes, they originally had the opportunity to become the closest people, but in the end, it was just a big dream. Each had their own marriage. On the surface, it seemed that there was no big deal, but every time they thought about it in the future, it would be a painful matter. Especially for these two, anyone with a discerning eye could see that they had invited each other. Jiang Yuan gently placed the teacup on the table. In the midst of the silence, the sound of her action was like a thunderclap that struck everyone's heart. Then, what was even more important was her words. She asked, "Jin Heir, have you thought it through?" On this day, Lian Xiao and Lu Zhu were doing embroidery in the courtyard. After a few days of persuasion, Lu Zhu had finally returned to her former self. At least on the surface, she did not seem to be sad anymore. As long as she took the first step, the future would be easy. As Lu Zhu and Lian Xiao were talking, they saw a third-rank maid sweeping the outer courtyard hurriedly run in, shouting, "Not good, not good. Does he want to apologize to young Madam and Lu Zhu? I'm afraid it won't be that easy." Jin San muttered. Liao Meng smiled and said a few more words to Zhou Mama. Zhou Mama then went back into the room to brew medicine. After Zhou Mama left, Liao Meng then returned to the room. The pot of orchids in the middle of the room was in full bloom. In this kind of weather, orchids were very difficult to raise, and it was rare to see one in such good bloom. Liao Meng gently stroked the petals of the pot of orchids. The petals emitted an extremely tempting fragrance, as if smelling it too much would make one's mouth dry. Jiang Yuan continued to ignore him and continued to write stroke by stroke. The room was completely silent and no one spoke. Even Steward Lin and Jin San and Jin Si, who had rushed to stand outside the room, did not dare to speak. Anyone could see that Jiang Yuan was deliberately giving Jin Heir the cold shoulder. However, when they thought about it, it was understandable. After all, Lu Zhu was Jiang Yuan's personal maidservant. Being insulted like this was equivalent to slapping her face. Although Jiang Yuan usually looked cold, she was actually a very protective person. Zhou Mama looked at Liao Meng and hesitated to speak a few times. Finally, she could not help but ask, "Miss, is it really okay for us to do this?" Jin San and Jin Si were already frowning, but they could not go in and speak rashly. Steward Lin, on the other hand, was so angry that he stamped his feet and kept scolding Jin Heir for being a blockhead. This old servant just feels that it is too serious to tarnish Mrs.'s reputation. Moreover, if second young Master Huang finds out about this in the future, how will Miss clean up the mess? "Miss, please don't blame this old servant for thinking too much. After all, Miss was raised by this old servant, and this kind of thing is something that I cannot not worry about." In the courtyard in the east of the city, the woman who had been crying uncontrollably in the morning had now changed into a clean set of clothes. The light yellow embroidered orchid cotton padded skirt was not too extravagant, but it was elegant enough to show off the woman's slim waist. If it were not for the short and plump woman's worried expression, all of this could be considered beautiful. Lu Zhu did not suspect anything and nodded in agreement. When they walked out of the courtyard, Lian Xiao asked, "What happened?" She faintly guessed that this matter had something to do with Lu Zhu. The little servant girl's mouth flattened as if she was about to cry. "Lian Xiao Jijia, something has happened." Outside, there are rumors that Lu Zhu Jiejie used young madam's power to seduce someone else's fiancé. It is indeed a little too arrogant. Jiang Yuan looked indifferently at the corner of her sleeves and suddenly smiled, to use these methods on my people, they are indeed not afraid of death. Such a cold tone. Jean Eyre maintained his half-kneeling position and said in a low voice, "Young madam, this subordinate is here regarding Lu Zhu." "I do not know about Lu Zhu, only Lien Qiao knows." Jiang Yuan said indifferently. Since Jiang Yuan did not speak, Jean Eyre also could not stand up. Only when the incense in the room had burned out did Jiang Yuan put down her brush. She shook the paper to dry and placed it in an envelope before placing it to one side. She looked up at Jean Eyre and asked, "What is it?" "Don't cry." Jiang Yuan's gaze was somewhat cold. She only said to Tianzhu, "What is that woman's background? Have you found out?" She said it so well, but how can she go back? She clearly wants to snatch Lu Zhu's marriage. I think that one may know a person's face but not their heart. I don't know how blind Jean Eyre was to be blinded by this kind of person. With Jiang Yuan's approval, Lien Qiao was finally able to vent the resentment in her heart since yesterday. She immediately poured beans out of a bamboo tube and said, "What's the use of looking for Lu Zhu now? Could it be that you think that by saying a few good words, Lu Zhu will forgive you? Don't treat everyone as fools and think that every woman is dead set on you. Although Lu Zhu is not a young lady from a wealthy family, she is still a well-behaved and pure young lady. How can she be tormented by you like this? If you use the methods that you used on brothel girls on Lu Zhu, I will spit on you." In a moment of agitation, Lien Qiao recited the words that she had exchanged with the evil slaves in the early years at the residence. However, no one had expected that Jean Eyre would actually push the door open and walk in. Such a large movement would normally be overstepping his boundaries. Lien Qiao anxiously said, "You have such great guts. Young madam did not allow you to enter and you came in. What kind of rule is this? What happened to Jean Eyre?" Jean San and Jean Si had grown up together with Jean Eyre, so they had a brotherly relationship. However, even the two of them felt that what Jean Eyre had done was not right. If Jean Eyre had hit Lu Zhu, the two of them would not have believed it at first. After all, Jean Eyre had always been a person who had tender and protective feelings for the fairer sex. However, after not returning for a night and not saying anything the next day, the two of them were somewhat uncertain. Jiang Yuan usually did not scrupulously abide by etiquette and rules when dealing with servants. Moreover, Jean Eyre and the others were Xiao Xiao's trusted aides, so there was no need to be so particular. On one hand, Lien Qiao was shocked that Jean Eyre had not even followed the superficial rules. On the other hand, she wanted to stand up for Lu Zhu. However, after Jean Eyre entered the door, he did not say anything. The expression on his face could be said to be extremely ugly and there was a faint smell of alcohol on his body. Jean Eyre's footsteps did not stop as he walked towards the other side. At first, Steward Lin was a little baffled, but he immediately understood and said, "Could it be that you are going to apologize? That's good. That last Lu Zhu is after all one of young madam's people. If you bully her like this, it will also be a slap to young madam's face. It is only right for you to apologize. However, Jean Eyre, don't blame me, old Lin, for not telling you that women are very calculative. Today, you will definitely not be able to easily ask for her forgiveness. You only need to remember that when the time comes, no matter what she says, you will have to endure it. However, I have to say, why did you bully a young lady without rhyme or reason?" Chapter 224. These days, Jinying Wangfu had become even more depressing. It was even more desolate than before Jiang Yuan married into the family. Every servant's face always carried a bit of worry. If one did not know the reason, they would have thought that something big had happened to Jinying Wangfu. However, the truth was that something big had indeed happened to Jinying Wangfu. Although Jining Wangfu, Xiao Xiao, usually acted in a low-key manner, he could not resist his high-profile appearance. His life experience was also quite ostentatious. Whenever there was a disturbance, it would always quickly spread throughout the capital. What's more, this matter was not a trivial matter of catching cats and playing with dogs. Once it was related to romance, people's interest would be aroused. If there was also the addition of bullying, then it would be the top topic of discussion in the tea-houses. Lu Zhu probably did not expect that in her lifetime, she would become the topic of discussion in the streets and alleys. However, this matter could not be considered a good thing. The people of the capital all said that Jining Wangfei, Jiang Ruan, was really not a soft persimmon. Initially, she was an unfavored daughter, but she became Hong and Junzhu, personally recognized by Empress Dowager Ida. Then, she married into Jining Wangfu. In the end, she even sued her own biological father. Her methods were really tough. They did not expect that the maidservant by her side would not be outdone. Indeed, Xiao Wangye had a capable subordinate who was already engaged to someone else in his hometown. However, the maidservant by Wang Fei's side had taken a fancy to this imperial bodyguard and had Wang Fei make the decision to ask for a marriage. Now that the imperial bodyguard's fiancé had come knocking on his door, that imperial bodyguard was indeed a person who valued friendship and righteousness. He refused to yield to Wang Fei's pressure and still cancelled the engagement with the maidservant. He wanted to fulfill his promise and marry a girl from his hometown. People always followed what others said, especially when everyone preached. In the end, it was already beyond recognition. It was a vivid image of an evil tyrant who had taken a fancy to a good girl and wanted to force her to buy and sell. It was just that the male and female were reversed. In the end, Lu Zhu's image in everyone's mouth was a vulgar and unreasonable ugly woman. That Liao family's young miss was actually gentle and considerate, beautiful and generous. When this news spread to Jining Palace, everyone was furious. Lu Zhu usually treated everyone very well, so she was slandered for no reason. But now, everyone in the capital was talking about this. Even if she clarified, no one would listen. If she wanted to protect her and teach those gossiping people a lesson, she really couldn't do it. When Jiang Ruan heard this, she did not say anything. She only let Tian Zhu continue to pay attention to the movements of the Liao family's young lady. As for Lu Zhu, after hearing these words, she laughed it off. Perhaps it was because the impact of this matter on her was so great that she seemed to have matured quite a bit overnight. Her actions were also much more stable. However, the originally carefree and easygoing girl had become like this. In the eyes of the crowd, it was not good to see such a scene. As for Jean Eyre, perhaps he felt that he did not have the face to see the dewdrops or something else, he became more and more unwilling to stay in the Wangfu. He also gradually became taciturn, almost becoming the second Jean Yi. From housekeeper Lin's mouth, it seemed that he had already written a letter back to his hometown to discuss with his parents about his marriage with the Liao family's young lady. As for the details, he did not know. Lian Qiao cried out for Lu Zhu's injustice. She looked for Jean Eyre once and scolded him for having no conscience. That Liao family's young lady was also not a good person, splashing dirty water on Lu Zhu for no reason. After all, Lu Zhu was still an unmarried girl. Originally, the matter between her and Jean Eyre was only known by her own people in Jining Palace. Now that it was spread out, it was easy to imagine how big of an impact it would have on Lu Zhu's reputation. In the future, it would be very difficult for Lu Zhu to find a good family. Jean Eyre silently listened to Lian Qiao's scolding and said that this matter was definitely not done by Liao Meng. He would definitely find out who was behind this and give Lu Zhu an explanation. He was not willing to say anything else. Lian Qiao was anxious and said that she would wait for Jean Eyre to find out who was behind this. On this day, there was a rare sunny day in River East. There was a faint smell of early spring. In the tea house, the waiter was running back and forth to serve tea to the guests. It was afternoon and the guests were eating melon seeds while chatting about the rumors in the capital. I heard that the princess's maid, Lu Zhu, is also a domineering person. Not long ago, I heard that the imperial bodyguard had already discussed his marriage with his original fiancée in his hometown. That maid even made a big fuss in front of the princess. From what I see, this matter is not over yet. A thin man wearing a felt hat said mysteriously. On the other hand, the fat man who was talking to him said, "You don't understand. Before you hit a dog, you have to look at its owner. No matter how bad that maid is, she is still the princess's maid. Naturally, the princess would be biased towards the person in front of her. However, such a thing happened out of the blue. I heard that the young lady is from a big family and is also a reasonable person. Such a beautiful and gentle lady, how could she meet such a troublesome servant? Sigh, the heavens are really blind. These days, good people don't have good karma." The two people were talking and did not notice that there was a man and woman sitting at a tea table beside them. The man clenched his fists and his face was very gloomy, as if he was trying to suppress his anger. The woman hesitated for a moment and was about to stand up. The man grabbed her arm and stopped her movement. He whispered, "Miss Liao, what do you want to do?" "Naturally, I want to clarify the matter for Miss Lu Zhu." Liao Meng was slightly surprised, but then she smiled and said, "Could it be that second young master wants to watch Lady Dewdrop being talked about like this? You clearly know that Miss Lu Zhu is not such a person. It is not a gentleman to let people slander a woman's reputation." Jean Eyre was startled, but then he said in a deep voice, "This matter is not clear yet. It is futile to explain it now. Let's forget about it. When I find the person behind this, the truth will naturally come to light." Liao Meng was also stunned. She hesitated for a moment, but still sat down. Looking at Jean Eyre, she said, "But no matter what, this matter started because of me. Second young master, this matter should not have developed to this point. I think I should pay a visit another day and personally explain this matter to Miss Lu Zhu. I want to apologize to her. The reason why you are in this situation is all because of me. This matter has nothing to do with you." Jean Eyre lowered his head, his voice somewhat low, "It is I who do not have the fate to be her husband. With her temperament, if you go to the Prince Fu, not only will this matter not be resolved, it will become more serious. I am sorry for her, and I am also sorry for you. Even if there is a need to atone, it should be me." Liao Meng lowered her eyes and looked at Jean Eyre's clenched fists on the table. Finally, she patted the back of his hand and said, "It's all right, second young master. Everything will be fine." That night, after Xiao Xiao had taken a bath, he saw that Jiang Wan was not reading on the bed as usual. Instead, she was staring at the screen in front of her, lost in thought. He walked to the edge of the bed and sat down. In a low voice, he asked, "Why is your face so ugly?" Jiang Wan pushed his hand away and said, "These past few days, you have been so busy that I could not even see your shadow. Finally, you are willing to come back and take a look at the Fu." Xiao Xiao also noticed the anger in her words. Slightly startled, he looked at Jiang Wan in confusion and asked, "Did something happen in the Fu?" "Isn't it because of your good subordinate?" Jiang Wan sat up straight and looked at him with great displeasure, saying, "In vain, I entrusted my servant to him. He is such an unreliable person, doing such a heartless and unscrupulous thing. If he was not still working under you, I would not have let him go." These words made Xiao Xiao even more confused. He frowned and asked, "Who are you talking about?" Jiang Wan rolled her eyes at him and told Xiao Xiao everything that had happened in the Fu these past few days. When Xiao Xiao was busy, he left early in the morning and returned late at night. Even if there was a genie guard to report to him, it was also related to the imperial court's official business. How could he talk about these matters of love? Therefore, he really did not know about these matters regarding Jean Eyre and Lu Zhu. In the end, Jiang Wan said, "What do you plan to do now?" What do I plan to do? Xiao Xiao's brows furrowed even tighter. He really had never interfered with his subordinates' domestic affairs. He looked at Jiang Wan and asked, "What do you want to do?" "Your own subordinates, naturally you discipline them yourself." Jiang Wan pretended to hit him. "No matter what, he bullied my people, so he bullied me. Leave Miss Liao's matter to me. As for Jean Eyre, you better give him a warning. This matter will not end so easily." Xiao Xiao stroked her hair and pulled her into his arms, coaxing her, "Okay, I will find an opportunity to warn him. However, Wan, Jean Eyre has been with me for many years. He has a sense of propriety. Miss Liao, don't act rashly. This matter should be a misunderstanding." Jean Eyre had been with Xiao Xiao for many years. Xiao Xiao was also a protective person. Since Jean Eyre was this person, Xiao Xiao would definitely protect him. Jiang Wan was disinclined to argue with him. However, she was still somewhat unhappy in her heart, so she said a few more words to Xiao Xiao before letting it go. However, Xiao Xiao had said that he would warn Jean Eyre on another day. Before that time arrived, another incident occurred. The next day, Lu Zhu was carrying a new medicinal cuisine that she had just instructed the small kitchen to prepare for Jiang Wan. After carefully giving instructions, she prepared to return to the courtyard. Lian Xiao was in the study serving Jiang Wan. Lu Zhu had just entered the small courtyard when she heard the gatekeeper hurriedly running over to inform her, "Lu Zhu Jijia, there is a young lady outside looking for you." "Young lady?" Lu Zhu was stunned. "What young lady?" The gatekeeper scratched his head and said, "I don't know either. She looks very unfamiliar. However, that young lady said that she is Lu Zhu Jiejia's friend. She does not look like a bad person. Lu Zhu Jiejia, please go and take a look." Although Lu Zhu did not know how she could be acquainted with someone in the capital, she thought that it would not be good if she was delayed by some urgent matter. Thus, she patted her skirt and said, "Okay, I will go and take a look." When she arrived at the entrance of the residence, she saw that there was indeed a lady dressed in blue standing at the entrance. She had the appearance of a willow branch swaying in the wind. Her features were elegant. Even if she had been burnt to ashes, Lu Zhu could still recognize her. She was none other than the young lady of the Liao family, Liao Meng. Although Lu Zhu looked calm on the surface these past few days, how could she not feel wronged and angry when such a big pot of dirty water was splashed on her? Originally, she had a temperament that could not bear to be wronged. These days, she was afraid that everyone would be worried, so she had to force a smile. Now that she saw Liao Meng, the anger in her heart was immediately aroused. Everyone said that the person who spread the rumors behind the scenes had not been investigated clearly. Perhaps it was not this young lady of the Liao family. However, from Lu Zhu's point of view, even if it was not Liao Meng who spread those slanderous words, it was still because of her. Immediately, the smile on her face disappeared. She looked at Liao Meng and said coldly, "What are you doing here?" I am here to apologize to Miss Lu Zhu." Liao Meng didn't seem to expect that Lu Zhu would change her face so quickly. For a moment, she was a bit scared. However, perhaps she was a young lady from a big family, so she quickly recovered her calmness. She bowed to Lu Zhu and said, "These days, I have also heard the rumors outside. Liao Meng is deeply frightened. After all, this is all because of me. If Liao Meng had not done something wrong, Miss Lu Zhu and the second young master would still be a couple. Liao Meng. It is all Liao Meng's fault. You flatter me." Lu Zhu said coldly. Liao Meng thought for a moment, then suddenly reached out and untied her purse. She took out a thick stack of banknotes from the purse. She looked at Lu Zhu and said, "I am the one who ruined your marriage. In this life, I don't ask for your forgiveness. This banknote is the only thing I can do for you. You take it." That thick stack of banknotes was about 2 taels of silver. Lu Zhu was startled at first, but after listening to her words, she suddenly turned around. The expression on her face was already very angry. To her, this was an undisguised humiliation. Although she was a servant, in all fairness, Jiang Wan had never treated her like other masters would treat their servants. Lu Zhu had always been very comfortable at Jiang Ruan's side. From the time she followed Jiang Ruan until now, this was the first time she had suffered such humiliation. She took a deep breath, and instead of being angry, she smiled and said, "You really are a young lady from a big family. The rules of this apology are complete, but to only take out this little bit of sincerity, it is rather too stingy." Liao Meng was startled, and then said, "Miss Lu Zhu, I have come to the capital. This is all the money I have. If Miss Lu Zhu feels that it is not enough, then—" Liao Meng was stunned, and then slowly bent her knees and knelt down. A beautiful and magnanimous young lady kneeled down in front of a young lady dressed as a servant girl in front of Jining Wangfu. The crowd could not help but think of the earlier rumors. In addition, there were already people watching from the side. Although they were not clear about what was said, but they could see that the young lady had an aggrieved expression and the servant girl was aggressive. Immediately, someone scolded, "Ai, this young lady is really pitiful. This servant girl is really taking advantage of her position to bully others. How can she be so aggrieved? A good young lady has to kneel down in front of others in the middle of the street." "Yes, yes, yes. I just saw that young lady give her some money. Look at that thick stack of banknotes. This is accepting other people's money, yet she still wants them to kneel. This is really too cruel," a woman said. "From what I can see, this must be the servant girl who was at Jining Palace's Wangfei's side a few days ago. This young lady who is kneeling should be the imperial bodyguard's fiancée. Indeed, seeing once is better than hearing 100 times. This servant girl is really as unreasonable as others say. That young lady is a pitiful one. Ai, a pitiful young lady, what kind of misfortune has she caused?" Standing a few meters away from the courtyard, Lien Qiao and Jiang Wan watched from afar. These few days, Jiang Wan had instructed that if anyone came looking for Lu Zhu, they should immediately report to her. When they heard that someone was looking for Lu Zhu, Lien Qiao and Jiang Wan came over to take a look. As expected, they saw this scene. Lien Qiao was extremely angry. Although she could not hear what the two of them were talking about, she knew what the young lady was thinking from her actions. Now that the people outside were all pointing and gossiping about Lu Zhu would definitely not suffer in silence. Thinking of this, Lien Qiao looked at Jiang Wan and said anxiously, "Young mistress, how long do we have to wait? This time, Lu Zhu is being bullied badly." Lien Qiao did not know why Jiang Wan, who had already arrived, did not say a word and did not even go forward to support Lu Zhu. She only heard Jiang Wan say faintly, "Let her remember. Lu Zhu is innocent by nature. Since this matter is unavoidable, she should use this opportunity to see some things clearly. In this world, there are some women who are cruel and ruthless. They only do evil on the surface. This kind of person is easy to deal with. However, there are some women who are used to being gentle. The more vicious the methods, the more pure and kind they appear on the surface. Lu Zhu will inevitably encounter a fight between women in the future. She has to experience it so that she will not be blinded by this kind of beautiful knife in the future." After hearing this, Lien Qiao did not say anything and stood silently at one side. This was the first time Lu Zhu encountered such a situation. In the past, she had always had Jiang Wan by her side. This was the first time she encountered a person who was used to playing tricks like Liao Meng. The surrounding people looked at her as if they were looking at an evil person. Lu Zhu felt very wronged. If it was in the past, she would have swallowed this insult for the sake of the prince's residence. However, looking at Liao Meng's sincere and remorseful expression, she felt like she was the victim. The anger in her heart rose. Thinking about it again, if Jiang Wan were to encounter such a situation, she would definitely not swallow this insult. Since the outside world said that she was a bully, she could not bear this bad reputation for nothing. Before the crowd could react, Lu Zhu quickly walked to the kneeling Liao Meng and raised her hand. Pa, 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 3 crisp sounds were heard. Immediately, clear fingerprints appeared on Liao Meng's face. Outside, the servants who had been instructed by Jiang Wan not to go out saw Lu Zhu's violent means and were dumbstruck. Lian Qiao was also a little surprised. Lu Zhu's mouth was very sharp, but she had always been a person who used her mouth and not her hands. Such a delicate and pretty little girl had been slapped 3 times without even blinking her eyes, causing everyone to be dumbfounded. However, Jiang Wan could not help but laugh. Her eyes also carried a bit of admiration. Liao Meng did not expect Lu Zhu to act so quickly. She was also stunned by Lu Zhu's slaps and forgot what she was going to do next. However, Lu Zhu looked at her and smiled. I originally thought that although this matter was caused by you, perhaps you were not a bad person. It was just a coincidence. Now that I saw you kneel, I understand that I was wrong. How can there be such a rude and lowly person like you? It seems that I am not the only one who uses this method to bully others. You still boast that you are from a noble family. Bah, I am going to laugh my head off. The one I hit today is you. I will also seek justice for those young ladies who have been bullied by you all these years. Lu Zhu. Just as she finished speaking, she heard Jean Eyre's voice. He was also shocked by the scene in front of him. Almost without hesitation, he walked to Liao Meng's side and helped her up. He angrily said, "How can you randomly hurt people? Apologize. Apologize my ass." Dewdrop casually scolded, "Don't do things more than 3 times. I told you long ago, don't treat everyone as a fool. At that time, you slapped me once. Now that I have slapped her 3 times, it is not a loss." Lu Zhu really had the talent to be a playboy. Her words made Jean Eyre somewhat speechless. The disdainful expression on her face was even more surprising. It was as if she was a completely different person from her usual self. Liao Meng pushed away Jean Eyre's hand and smiled at Lu Zhu. Miss Lu Zhu's heart is full of resentment. No matter how you treat me, I deserve it. Even if it is a slap, I can bear it. What did I do to you? Lu Zhu originally turned around and was about to leave. When she heard this, she turned back and sneered, "Miss Liao, what are you saying? Did I force you to kneel? Did I force you to give me the money? This is what Miss Liao said yourself, that you want to apologize to me. It is Miss Liao's own actions. Could it be that Miss Liao's so-called apology is hypocritical and pretentious while calling people over to denounce me? This is the first time I have seen such an apology." Enough. Jean Eyre interrupted Lu Zhu's words. His expression was already very angry. He grabbed Lu Zhu's hand and said, "You have gone too far. If you have any resentment, you can vent it on me. Why take it out on an unrelated person? Apologize." He was determined to make Lu Zhu apologize. After all, Jean Eyre was a martial artist. He grabbed Lu Zhu's hand with a lot of strength. Lu Zhu was almost in tears because of the pain, but she stubbornly stared at him and did not speak. "It's so lively outside. I don't know when any random cat or dog can stir up trouble in front of my Jining palace." A voice with a smile came from the door. But for some reason, when the people outside heard it, it made their hearts tighten. This included Liao Meng. She raised her head and saw a beautiful woman dressed in red walking out from the entrance of the manor, followed by a group of servants. She still had a smile on her face, and her tone was very gentle, but when those clear eyes looked over, they were like sharp blades, making people feel cold. Young mistress. When Lu Zhu saw Jiang Wan, her eyes were somewhat red. Jiang Wan had come out at this time to support her. Jin Er and Liao Meng had not yet spoken when Jiang Ruan looked at them and spoke first. Jin Er, I don't know what relationship you have with this young lady, and what grievances you have. But just now, I did hear the surrounding people say that my servant took advantage of my power to bully others. But this young lady took the initiative to come here. I don't care what the reason is, but this young lady's conduct makes people say that my servant is saying something about me, and saying something about me is saying something about Jining Palace's face. Don't tell me you want to smear Wang Fu's face because of your own personal matters. These words were soft and gentle, but they were not refutable. It clearly meant, that's right, what you want to protect is short. Jin Er lowered his head and said in a low voice, Jin Er does not dare. I know you are someone who understands the rules. Without rules, nothing can be accomplished. Jiang Ruan smiled slightly. Now, take this young lady who came out of nowhere and get lost. Liao Meng's hands trembled. She looked up at the woman. The woman's lips were still smiling, but the corners of her eyes revealed a dense coldness. Chapter 225. After Lu Zhu followed Jiang Ruan back to her room, she still stood at the side without moving. After a long time, Jiang Ruan raised her head, and Lu Zhu's eyes suddenly reddened. In a low voice, she said, Nubi was wrong, please punish me, young Furen. What's wrong? Jiang Ruan looked at her and asked. Lian Xiao moved her lips but didn't say anything in the end. Lu Zhu said, Nubi should not have quarreled with people at the entrance of the Wang Fu. For no reason, the Wang Fu has become the laughingstock of others. Jiang Ruan shook her head. You're wrong, but that's not where you're wrong. Your mistake was that you were too polite to that woman from the beginning. I thought that after following me for so long, you would be able to see through people's hearts. I didn't expect you to still be too upright, but I can't blame you. Jiang Ruan lowered her eyelids. Since that person dared to cause a ruckus at the entrance of the Wang Fu, it can be assumed that he has nothing to fear. He most likely has a backup plan. Don't go out these few days. Leave this matter to me. These words made Lu Zhu want to cry again. The grievances she had suffered over the past few days had been hidden in the bottom of her heart, but Jiang Ruan's words seemed to have given her a pillar of support in an instant. Jiang Ruan had always been a very protective person. At that time, she could not tolerate anyone saying a bad word about Jiang Xing. Now, she was similarly protective of her. It was as if with Jiang Ruan around, the original sadness was no longer as bad. She paused for a moment before saying hesitantly, this matter. Would it cause conflict between young madam and the embroidered uniform guards? No matter how wrong Jin Er was, he was still a member of the embroidered uniform guard, just like how Lian Xiao stood by her side unconditionally. Jiang Ruan had humiliated Jin Er in front of everyone, so it was inevitable that the embroidered uniform guard would not think too much about it. It might even cause a misunderstanding between Xiao Xiao and Jiang Ruan. Don't worry, Jiang Ruan smiled slightly. There is absolutely no reason for a subordinate to be prejudiced against a master. If it were not for the sake of Jin Er's face today, I would have already sent people to beat them out. Dewdrop said nothing more. Outside the Fu, Jin Er helped Liao Meng into a carriage on the side. Zhou Mama was in the carriage, and Liao Meng didn't allow her to get out. Zhou Mama also didn't know what had happened outside. When she saw Jin Er, she was stunned at first, but then she saw the palm print on Liao Meng's face. She immediately jumped in fright and said in a fluster, "Io, my young lady, what happened to you? Who beat him up? Oh my God, this area is so swollen. Miss, why don't you let me follow you?" Jin Er was slightly ashamed and could only say, "It's all my fault. I didn't take good care of Miss Liao. This has nothing to do with you." Liao Meng interrupted him anxiously and said to Mrs. Zhou, I'm fine. It was just a misunderstanding. Second young master, you should go to do your own things first. The affairs in the prince's mansion are complicated. It's not a solution for you to accompany me all the time. It's still early now. I think you have something important to do. I will go back with Mrs. Zhou. Jane Eyre thought for a moment, then said, You're a weak girl, what if something happens on the road? Coming to the imperial residence today is already a risk, it's better for me to send you off. You really don't have to, Liao Meng said with a smile, besides, Miss Lu Zhu has misunderstood just now. If you send me like this, it will make the knot in their hearts deeper and deeper. It doesn't matter. The coachman knows the way. Mrs. Zhou and I won't make any mistakes in broad daylight. But second young master, if you make Princess unhappy, will it affect you in front of Prince Yu? Thinking about it, I feel that it's all my fault today. I always give you trouble. Her words were said in a gentle and tactful manner. It made others not know how to respond. Jane Eyre's expression changed. He said, I said that this has nothing to do with you. You don't have to worry about it. Since that's the case, I will leave and come back to the residence to see you later. You and Mrs. Zhou must be careful on the road. Liao Meng nodded in agreement. She smiled and put down the curtain of the carriage. The crowd of onlookers had already dispersed. Jane Eyre then mounted the horse and galloped in the opposite direction. In the carriage, Mrs. Zhou caressed Liao Meng's face with heartache, Miss, that Yahuan is too ruthless. This red mark will take a few days to disappear. She's really a ruthless person. How can second young master want such a woman? Once her hand touched her skin, she felt a burning pain. Lu Zhu had indeed used a lot of strength. At this moment, half of Liao Meng's face was swollen and it was almost impossible to see her original face. Liao Meng gritted her teeth and said, I didn't expect her to be such a ruthless person. Her original plan today was to target Lu Zhu. Originally, she had already put on this weak posture and played the sympathy card. A person with a shallow mind like Lu Zhu would only be at a disadvantage. However, she didn't expect that this girl, who looked honest, was actually a shrew. These 3 slaps had almost stunned her. She didn't expect that she would suffer such a loss today. However, what made Liao Meng's heart palpitate was the woman in red who walked out of the entrance of the Wang Fu. She was the current young madam of Jinying Wang Fu, Jiang Ruan. Long before she came, she had already inquired about Jiang Ruan. She knew that this woman was astute and powerful. She didn't want to see it with her own eyes today. Being looked at by that pair of eyes, she felt that the rumors said that Jiang Ruan was not even 1/10,000th of what she actually was. On the surface, that pair of eyes was smiling. However, the sharpness within was shocking. It was as if being looked at by those eyes, everything in one's heart could not be hidden. Moreover, Jiang Ruan's protectiveness towards Lu Zhu was almost naked. Zhou Mama was still nagging with heartache. She asked, Miss, why don't we go to the pharmacy now to get some medicine? The wound on the face needs to disappear sooner. That girl's heart is too black. How can she specifically choose to hit someone's face? There's no need, Zhou Mama. Liao Meng came back to her senses and said, I'm not feeling well. Let's go back to the residence and lie down for a while. There was no such thing as such an easy thing to do in this world. Since Lu Zhu had already slapped her 3 times, these 3 slaps would sooner or later be returned to Lu Zhu. So what if Jiang Ruan was protective? What she wanted was for her to be protective. It would be strange if she didn't. The more she was protective, the more interesting it would be in the future. Liao Meng slowly caressed her red and swollen cheeks. The corners of her mouth hooked up in an imperceptible smile. Jiang Ruan had humiliated Jane Eyre in front of the countless commoners at the entrance of Jinying Wang Fu. In less than the time it took to burn a stick of incense, this matter had spread throughout the entire Jinying Wang Fu. In other words, it had spread through the mouths of everyone in the capital city, who took delight in talking about it. The servants in Jinying Wang Fu kept quiet out of fear day by day. Ever since Jiang Ruan had entered the Fu and become a Wangfei, she rarely put on the airs of Duan Wangfei. Although her temperament couldn't be considered lively, she had always treated the servants gently. Occasionally, when the servants made a mistake, she didn't pursue it. She was a magnanimous mistress, and everyone liked her very much. This was the first time that she had so clearly expressed her displeasure towards the brocade guards. She had even used the airs of a Wangfei to suppress the other party. If it was because of her personal matters, then it would have been fine. However, it had to be because of a family matter. Both the palm and the back of the hand were flesh. Although everyone felt that Jean Eyre had indeed acted improperly, the brocade guards never cared about family matters and emotional matters. There was absolutely no reason for them to interfere in this matter. Moreover, Jean Eyre had grown up together with them, so it was impossible for them to sever their relationship. In a short period of time, the situation in the Fu had become very distinct. The people that Jiang Wan brought along and the brocade guards ignored each other. Yi Feng, on the other hand, went to look for Lian Qiao a few times. However, Lian Qiao now found the brocade guards to be an eyesore. Therefore, when she saw him, she didn't have a good expression. Not only did the relationship between the servants become subtle, but the relationship between Xiao Xiao and Jiang Wan also became somewhat subtle. Xiao Xiao was already very busy today, so the two of them didn't have much time to meet. Moreover, such a vexing matter had occurred in the Fu. In any case, Jean Eyre was still Xiao Xiao's subordinate. Xiao Xiao did not punish Jean Eyre for his family matters. However, Jiang Wan was a person who couldn't tolerate sand in her eyes. Based on her temperament, it was impossible for her to quarrel with Xiao Xiao. Therefore, her attitude had imperceptibly become somewhat cold. Xiao Xiao didn't seem to notice this. Women were always more sensitive. Unknowingly, some estrangement and alienation had arisen. On this day, Lu Zhu was teaching a few new servant girls who had just entered the courtyard to sweep some things to pay attention to. Suddenly, she heard the young servant girls' cries of alarm. Before she could understand what was going on, she saw a black shadow striding over. When it arrived in front of her, she felt a sharp pain in her wrist. Someone was gripping her wrist so tightly that it hurt. She raised her head and a familiar face entered her eyes. It was Jean Eyre. However, this Jean Eyre's face was not like the usual frivolous grin that always hung on his face. He was also not as silent and speechless as before. At this moment, the expression on his face was somewhat angry and somewhat disappointed. Before Lu Zhu could open her mouth, Jean Eyre spoke first. "Why did you do that?" This question was asked without rhyme or reason, causing Lu Zhu to be somewhat at a loss for a moment. However, when Jean Eyre put on an attitude of denouncing her, her anger soared. She immediately roared back, not to be outdone, "What do you mean by what? Why did you act like a mad dog and randomly bite people in broad daylight?" Jean Eyre grabbed her hand and refused to let go. He gritted his teeth and said, "This matter started because of me. I have wronged you. However, how could you be so vicious as to let someone do that to Liao Meng? Let go of me." Lu Zhu's hand hurt from his grip. In a fit of anger, she bit Jean Eyre's wrist. Jean Eyre loosened his grip due to the pain and Lu Zhu took the opportunity to struggle free. Immediately, a red and swollen mark appeared on her slender wrist. Lu Zhu angrily said, "What do you mean by that? Let me tell you, there are 2 ways to splash dirty water on others, but not 3 or 4 times. Don't think of using it on me again." After Lu Zhu was beaten, no matter how she felt when she saw Jean Eyre again, at least on the surface, she was calm. She scolded when she needed to scold, hit when she needed to hit, and did not remember the slightest bit of affection from the past. Speaking like a stranger, Jean Eyre was slightly startled. Then, he frowned and glanced at the servant girls who had gathered around to look at them. Ignoring Lu Zhu's objections, he pulled Lu Zhu's hand and walked to the side of the fake mountain in the garden of the Fu. He tried his best to lower his voice, but still could not help but reveal a trace of suppressed anger. you found someone to harm her. Lu Zhu's heart was very sour when she saw him act like this just for Liao Meng. When she heard his words, she did not get angry but instead laughed. Jin Air, touch your conscience and ask, you and I have not known each other for a day and night. Don't you know what kind of person I am? Setting people up in the gutter has never been something that I, Lu Zhu, would do. But that fiancé of yours. She sneered, a thief calling out a thief. Jin Air's grip on her hand tightened again. Lu Zhu frowned and looked at him. Suddenly, she discovered that Jin Air's eyes were slightly red. She endured it and finally asked stiffly, what happened to her? Last night, someone broke into her courtyard and wanted to take her body by force. Although someone tried to rescue her later, they did not succeed, but her innocence was ruined. Jin Air said in a low voice, as if every word was squeezed out from the gaps between his teeth. When Lu Zhu heard this, she was somewhat stunned at first. Then, a nameless fire rose in her heart and she laughed, could it be that you think that I did this? It really wasn't you? Jin Air asked in a hoarse voice. Lu Zhu abruptly raised her head to look at him. Her gaze was as fierce as a lion's. She stared into Jin Air's eyes and said word by word, it wasn't me. Jin Air let go of her hand. He seemed to be a little tired. Lu Zhu turned around and left. After taking 2 steps, she turned around and looked back. She saw that Jin Air was still standing motionless at the fake mountain. She walked over and stood in front of Jin Air, asking, why do you think that I did it? The masked man who was caught, Jin Air sighed, but his expression did not appear relaxed. Instead, it appeared very complicated. He continued, the person who admitted to giving him the money came from Jinying Wangfu. The news that Liao Meng's innocence was almost sullied in the middle of the night had spread throughout the entire capital the next day. By now, Jin Air, Liao Meng and Lu Zhu's matter had become the hottest topic in the entire capital. This matter would cause some disturbance every few days, but it caused the common people in the capital to have endless topics to talk about every day. Although those masked men did not succeed in the end, such a thing happened and it was spread all over the city. Liao Meng's reputation could be considered finished in this lifetime. However, there were more people who sympathized with her. Most of them secretly guessed who the person behind this was. There were also some people who felt that this matter was related to the servant girl in the Wangfu. No matter how the outside world guessed, the one who suffered was still Liao Meng. However, Liao Meng's result was better than other girls who encountered this kind of thing. That was that Jin Air was still a man who had feelings for her. He did not despise her or cancel the engagement because of this matter. In this way, in the eyes of the common people in the capital, these two people were a match made in heaven. After all, not everyone could be a couple who could go through hardships. In the courtyard, Zhou Mama picked up the bowl of medicine and fed it to Liao Meng. The medicine was also bitter, but Liao Meng drank it without frowning. Zhou Mama looked very haggard recently. She was the one who blamed herself the most for what happened to Liao Meng. She only blamed herself for not protecting Liao Meng well and letting outsiders take advantage of the loophole. Every day, she went to the yamen to urge them to catch the mastermind. After Zhou Mama fed Liao Meng the medicine, she went out. After Zhou Mama left, Liao Meng got out of bed. In the past few days, she was frightened and bedridden. She always looked a little panicked. But if someone saw her at this moment, they would be shocked. Liao Meng looked calm and even had a little smile on her face. She went to the dressing table and sat down. She took out a small box from the side. There was a small folded letter in the box. She slowly opened the letter and read it quickly. Then she tore it into pieces and threw it into the wastepaper basket she used to practice calligraphy. Then she slowly sat back on the bed and looked out of the window in a trance. Things had gone much smoother than she had imagined. There was no lack of people in this world who would protect their own. To set up a trap according to a person's temperament, it was nothing more than to grab hold of the weakest part of a person's heart. As long as one was human, there would always be a weakness. And the colder one's appearance was, the more intolerant one's heart was, and the higher one's emotional requirements were. As a result, the door to Jining Wang's Fu was opened. Of course, in this way, to her, it was just a case of everyone looking out for themselves. It was all for her own benefit. Liao Meng's guess was right. Jin Er's matter did not only affect Lu Zhu. For example, at this moment, she looked at Xiao Xiao and said angrily, "You suspect me?" Xiao Xiao was silent for a moment and did not speak. That day, Jin Er had impulsively come over to denounce her, causing Jiang Ruan to finally be unable to restrain the anger in her heart. Originally, it was fine if she had made Lu Zhu sad, but now, this dirty water had been splashed onto her. Jiang Ruan had originally been very disdainful of that Miss Liao, so when she heard this, she was really angry. At that time, she wanted to expel Jin Er from the brocade guard. However, Xiao Xiao stopped her. Jin Er had followed Xiao Xiao for many years. To Xiao Xiao, his position was similar to that of Bai Ji and Lu Zhu to Jiang Ruan. There was an unwritten rule in the brocade guard that the subordinates' family affairs were unrelated to the official affairs of the brocade guard. In the past, Xiao Xiao would never expel any member of the brocade guard for their own personal matters. Although the actions of the second member of the brocade guard were thoughtless, it had nothing to do with official business. The rules of the brocade guard were strict and could not be changed. Xiao Xiao wanted to convince the masses, so he could not hastily dispose of Jin Er. That day, only one of the masked men who had made a move on Liao Meng had been caught. That person claimed that someone had given them money to do this business. The identity of the person behind this was unknown, but it seemed to faintly reveal that it was someone from Jining Wang Fu. Originally, Jin Er had thought that it was Lu Zhu. However, Lu Zhu was a maidservant, so it was impossible for her to take out so much money. Moreover, Lu Zhu's temperament was not one to haggle over every penny. Naturally, the spearhead of suspicion fell on Jiang Ruan. Jiang Ruan's methods were ruthless, and she never showed mercy. Especially towards those who made her unhappy, she would certainly repay them 100-fold. That Liao Meng had bullied Lu Zhu. With Jiang Ruan's protective temperament, how could she not get back at her? Looking for someone to cause trouble for Liao Meng, with Jiang Ruan's temperament and wealth, seemed to be her doing. Jiang Ruan wanted to expel Jin Er, but Xiao Xiao did not comply. He even said that Jiang Ruan should not interfere in this matter. Jiang Ruan was flustered, so she spoke without thinking, "Are you suspecting me?" "I did not mean that." Xiao Xiao said, "It's just that this matter is his family's business, so there is no reason to interfere. Your subordinate is a person, but is my maidservant not a person?" Jiang Ruan said incredulously, "Xiao Xiao, I have also told you, this matter was not done by me, and it has nothing to do with me. I do not admit to this crime. You want to protect your shortcomings, and I also want to protect mine. Since we each have our own ideas, then there is no need to say anything." She heavily placed the book on the table, turned around, and walked out. This was the first time the husband and wife had quarreled since they had gotten married, and moreover, it was over a matter that had nothing to do with them. However, Xiao Xiao's temperament was originally cold, and Jiang Ruan's self-esteem was extremely strong. For a moment, the Cold War between them was even more frightening than the one between Lu Zhu and Jin Er. Everyone in the Fu felt insecure, and it was as if dark clouds were hanging over their heads. Xiao Xiao was usually very obedient towards Jiang Ruan, and he treated the brocade guard strictly. Unfortunately, he was also a person who was protective of his own people, and Jiang Ruan was also a person who was protective of her own people. Compared to Xiao Xiao, Jiang Ruan's temperament was slightly more prejudiced. Perhaps it was because of her previous life's experiences that she could not tolerate the people around her to suffer even the slightest bit of grievance. Once Xiao Xiao showed even the slightest bit of an attitude of shielding Jin Er, she could not help but be sensitive and overthink things, and her attitude became much more extreme. Xiao Xiao also became busier and busier, and the misunderstanding could not be explained. The invisible barrier between the two of them also became increasingly thick. On the contrary, Lu Zhu was extremely worried for Jiang Ruan. Looking at Jiang Ruan's back as she sat in the study, she said to Lian Xiao in a low voice, "Young Furen seems to be fine these past few days, but I am always worried that she has kept everything to herself. Wang Yi has not returned to the Fu much these past few days, how can this be good?" Lian Xiao shook her head and said, "Young Furen has a stubborn temperament, and Wang Yi is not someone who knows how to say sweet words and honeyed phrases, so naturally, this is not good. Let's not talk about them. Have you been any better? I don't think that Jean Eyre is a good match, and you are probably feeling sad in your heart." Now that Jiang Wan had become the target of suspicion, to Jean Eyre, if the son did not kill the son would die because of the child. Lu Zhu was also the cause of Liao Meng's mishap, so Jean Eyre and Lu Zhu could now be said to be true strangers. Moreover, Jiang Wan and Xiao Xiao were like this, so naturally, Lu Zhu also felt bad in her heart. Lu Zhu lowered her head, "This was originally caused by me, and originally, it was only my problem. It was my fault for making son-in-law and young Furen unhappy. However, Lian Xiao, in my heart, I feel that all of this was Liao Meng's doing. Perhaps you think that I am malicious, but for Liao Meng to encounter this matter, it may not necessarily be karma. I feel that since she is the cause of son-in-law and young Furen's anger, she is the evil person." Lian Xiao nodded Lu Zhu's head, "You, this girl, are not worried about your own matters anymore. Don't worry, young Furen is so intelligent, and she is used to manipulating people's hearts. She will certainly not be tricked by others. Let's just focus on our own matters." Lu Zhu sighed, "It is precisely because young Furen is good at manipulating people's hearts that she used to speculate on son-in-law with the eyes and thoughts of those people, which is why things are so bad. Young Furen can guess everyone's hearts, but she can't figure out her own heart." As the two of them were talking, they heard a little maid come in from outside to report, "Young Furen, Master Qi is here." At this moment, Xiao Xiao was also not in the Fu. Jiang Wan walked out of the room, and just as she reached the courtyard, she saw Qi Feng walking in from outside. She did not know what he had been busy with these days, but even though they were very close, she had not seen him visit. Jiang Wan smiled, "Why are you here? What a rare guest. A few days ago, a friend came to the capital, and I went to receive him for a while, so I did not have the time to come over." "Third sister-in-law, don't be angry," Qi Feng smiled, "I also know that I am in the wrong, so I specially came over to apologize." As he spoke, he raised the thing in his hand, which was a square box, and it was unknown what was inside. Jiang Wan smiled, "Who would come to visit with a gift? This is not a tavern that accepts money." Chapter 226. Qi Feng also smiled and said, "It's just some novelty. Third sister-in-law, what good things have you not seen in the Wangfu? I'm just showing my incompetence." He paused and said, "To tell you the truth, I heard that something happened in the Wangfu." Since Qi Feng had already said so, he must have heard the ins and outs of the matter. He and Xiao Xiao were martial brothers, and he was also helping Xiao Xiao in the matters of the 100 Zhang Tower. Naturally, he had a lot of friendship with the Genie Guard. Since he was a member of the Genie Guard, he must stand on the side of the Genie Guard. For this matter, Qi Feng might also be on the side of Gina. Jiang Wan smiled faintly and said, "Oh, is it possible that you are also here to denounce me?" After all, the matter of the dew had a great impact on her. Usually, she would speak in a gentle manner. Perhaps it was because she was not in a good mood these days, or because Qi Feng was also an acquaintance, there was no need to put on a mask in front of an acquaintance. Therefore, there was some sarcasm in her words. Qi Feng pointed to the stone table in the courtyard and said, "Why don't we sit down and have a chat?" Jiang Wan nodded and the two sat down in front of the stone table in the courtyard. Lien Xiao served tea and snacks and retreated to the side. Jiang Yuan looked at the tea. She still had a smile on her face, but her tone was a little cold. Could it be that Qi Feng also thinks that this matter is all my servant's fault, and that I also sent people to destroy Miss Liao's purity? According to third sister-in-law's character, it is very likely that she would do such a thing. Qi Feng smiled and stroked his chin. Now, he had shaved off all his beard, but he still retained his original habit. This action was a little abrupt, but he obviously did not feel it. He still looked at Jiang Ruan's unchanging expression with a smile and said, "But if third sister-in-law made a move, how could she let Miss Liao escape? Third sister-in-law's methods have never failed. So, the person behind this can't be third sister-in-law." Jiang Ruan also laughed. "What you mean is that I'm a bad person, but I'm a very bad person. Do you mean that I don't have the qualifications to be a bad person with a compassionate heart?" "No, no," Qi Feng quickly waved his hand and said, "I'm saying that third sister-in-law is brave and fierce, and her work is flawless. Such a lousy and flawed plan is definitely not made by third sister-in-law." When Jiang Yuan heard this, she looked at him with a smile that was not a smile and said, "Are you trying to curry favor with me by saying this? Aren't you afraid that this matter will reach the ears of the brocade guard? There is no such thing as a two-faced person." Qi Feng sighed. "Am I, Qi Feng, a two-faced fence-sitter in third sister-in-law's eyes?" Qi Feng smiled proudly. "Since third sister-in-law and the genie guards are on opposite sides, I will unconditionally stand on your side. We have done a big thing together, we have some friendship in times of adversity. Third sister-in-law, rest assured, I am an absolutely loyal person." Looking at Jiang Yuan smiling without saying anything, but her expression was obviously much softer than before, Qi Feng sighed in his heart and continued, "But third sister-in-law, have you ever thought about the person behind this matter?" "The person behind this?" Jiang Yuan said faintly, "I want to investigate, but now that your third brother is not in the Fu every day, I have nothing to say to him about this matter. After all, the brocade guard is his people, I can't order them around. Moreover, if his people can't find the person, how can I find him? After all, it was not me who did it. Maybe it was just that woman's own play." Play? Qi Feng was a little speechless. Although this is also very likely, reputation for a woman is more important than her life. If that Miss Liao really played such a play, wouldn't it be too much of a sacrifice for her? This is a losing business. A losing business? Jiang Yuan smiled lightly. "So, men and women always see things differently. Reputation is indeed important for a woman, but if she can get what she wants, then reputation is not important, and the sacrifice is worth it. Although this may seem like a self-destructive move in your eyes, as the days go by, you will slowly realize that this is not harmful to her at all. Even if she is criticized by others, it will only be a bit of irrelevant gossip. If you say so, then that woman has gained." "But I still don't understand." Qi Feng was a little confused. Jiang Yuan glanced at him. Even if Qi Feng was extremely intelligent and showed off his skills in the court, the rear courtyard and the front court were after all different battlefields. Men could never distinguish a woman's scheming mind. If Qi Feng thought so, then Xiao Xiao and Jean Eyre's thoughts could be imagined. Perhaps this was the difference between men and women. She smiled slightly. "Well, let me ask you, what is the background of that Miss Liao now? Her parents are dead, and she is alone. She carries the family's wealth, and her relatives are eyeing her covetously." Qi Feng thought about it and added a few more sentences. "Now, the only thing she can rely on is her marriage with Jean Eyre." "That's right, if you are her, what other path do you have now?" Jiang Yuan asked. Jean Eyre was speechless and mumbled, "Third sister-in-law, I am not a woman. Your analogy is too strange." Jiang Yuan did not respond to his words and continued, "For such a weak woman who carries the family's wealth, if she wants to keep it and not be shaken by her relatives, the only way is to find a good backer. Jin Er's family background and mansion are not bad. For Liao Meng, there is no better choice than Jin Er. To put it bluntly, if she passes this village, she will not be able to find this shop. Naturally, Liao Meng will hold on tightly to this opportunity. For those who want to cross the mountain, no matter how many choices there are, their ultimate goal is to cross the mountain. Similarly, if Liao Meng wants to marry into Jin Er's Fu, no matter what she does, no matter what sacrifices she has to make, as long as she can get what she wants in the end, this transaction is not considered a loss. Qi Feng listened without blinking. Jiang Ruan's voice was soft and sweet-sounding, but it was very clear and calm. Okay, let's take a look at the possible consequences of this matter. Now that the matter of Liao Meng being molested has been spread to everyone in the capital, everyone knows that she is a victim and a person to be pitied. Jin Er has not cancelled his marriage with her, so he has a good reputation in the capital. Even if there are people who say that Liao Meng is not worthy of Jin Er, it is only a very small number. In the future, when Jin Er and Liao Meng are married, they will say that they are a match made in heaven. On the contrary, Dezhu and I are now villains. Since Jin Er suspects that I am the one who did this, he will have more contact with Liao Meng. Qi Feng, tell me, it is just sacrificing one's reputation. At worst, a small number of people will say bad things about her, but she can get the blessings of everyone, the pity of her husband, and completely kill the woman who was previously involved with her husband. Is this transaction still considered a loss for Miss Liao? Qi Feng had long been stunned by what he heard. After a moment, he smiled bitterly and shook his head. I originally thought that I was smart, but younger sister is like a fool in front of third sister-in-law. Now it seems that it is not third sister-in-law, but that Miss Liao can almost play me in the palm of her hand. To actually use her own reputation as a bargaining chip, that Miss Liao is really not an ordinary person. As Qi Feng thought about this, he suddenly looked at Jiang Ruan and said, but third sister-in-law, since you have already seen through her intentions, according to what you said, it may indeed be a trap set by Liao Meng. Why not tell third brother about this? Jiang Ruan lowered her eyes. Why tell him? Xiao Xiao is a confident person, he has his own judgment. Since he has his own judgment, how can he believe what others say? It will only add to his troubles. Third sister-in-law, what you said is wrong. Qi Feng interrupted her words. You know that third brother is not such a person. Third sister-in-law, I think you are unwilling. Although Qi Feng was not as good at guessing people's minds as Jiang Ruan, after being with Jiang Ruan for so long, he had roughly figured out Jiang Ruan's character. Jiang Ruan was a somewhat awkward person. It was normal for a husband and wife to meet for the first time. She was not willing to bow her head, and even refused to explain. This might be another kind of arrogance. If it was someone who was thick-skinned and said good words, they would be reconciled after a little coaxing. However, the other party was a taciturn person like Xiao Xiao. Thinking about this, Qi Feng was also a little depressed. Jiang Ruan saw through his thoughts and pretended to be angry. You are not saying good words for Liao Meng, but for Xiao Xiao. If you are saying good words for him, forget it as soon as possible. I have no time to accompany you to drink tea. Hey, Qi Feng quickly touched his nose and said, No, how can I be such a person? What I mean is, third brother is too unreasonable. Third sister-in-law, don't be angry. Look at the little thing I brought for you. Qi Feng went to open the box on the side. There was a wooden carved round box in the box. Jiang Ruan took it and only saw that the round box was carved with a small person. The lid on the box could be opened, so she subconsciously opened it. Immediately, a smooth sound of music came out. She was shocked and looked at Qi Feng inquiringly. Qi Feng smiled and said, My friend just came back from the sea. This thing is from a Western country. It is called the 8 music box. There is the sound of music in it. Interesting, right? Jiang Ruan could not help but laugh. In fact, in her previous life and this life, she was in a different place. Although she did not have the opportunity to own some exquisite things, she had seen many rare treasures. It was just that the thing that Qi Feng found in a different way was different. This thing was not expensive, but it was novel and interesting, which was rare. Qi Feng had been here for so long, and finally saw that Jiang Ruan's smile was not polite and gentle, but from the heart. He was relieved and said, "Third sister-in-law, do you like it? If you like it, why don't you go there yourself?" He seemed to think of something and said, "He also has a lot of things in the Yibao pavilion. I don't know if third sister-in-law has been there. If you haven't, why don't you go and have a look now? Anyway, the Yibao pavilion belongs to our family. Maybe there is something that will catch your eye." Jiang Ruan was startled. She had not been to the Yibao pavilion for a long time. She knew that it was Xiao Xiao's business. She thought of the time when she went to the Yibao pavilion. At that time, she and Xiao Xiao were not husband and wife. When she went to the Yibao pavilion with Dong Ying'er and Zhao Jin, she was shocked by the price. At that time, she planned to get a precious shield for Jiang Xing. She thought for a while and said to Qi Feng with a smile, "Okay." This time it was Qi Feng's turn to be dumbfounded. He was just joking. After all, Jiang Ruan was now a princess. How could she always walk with an outsider like him? Although her relationship with Xiao Xiao was not close to the point of avoiding suspicion, he always felt that with Jiang Ruan's exquisite mind, she might have discovered his thoughts. Jiang Ruan was a person who could not bear to have sand in her eyes, but she could say the two words, "Okay," so calmly. Qi Feng also stared at her blankly for a while and did not speak. "What's wrong?" Jiang Ruan seemed to notice his gaze and said with a smile, "What's wrong? You have something to do, so you are unwilling to go out with me? I will trouble you this time. At worst, I will add in the travel expenses in the future." Qi Feng came back to his senses. He was also a man of character. Jiang Ruan, a woman, was so calm. If he refused again, it would seem a little strange. Moreover, the great Jin dynasty was not so harsh on married women. As long as there was no intimate action, there was no harm in it. Thinking that Jiang Ruan had been in a bad mood in the Fu recently, it was better to go out and relax. He smiled and said, "How would I dare? I will go prepare the carriage." Lian Qiao was still a little hesitant. If Jiang Ruan went out with Qi Feng like this, it would seem that Qi Feng was deliberately trying to poach her. Every time Qi Feng looked at Jiang Ruan, there was a strange look in his eyes. As Jiang Ruan's personal maid, Lian Qiao noticed it and muttered in her heart. Dezhu did not have so many concerns and only said, "Young madam has been trapped in the Fu for a long time. It is good to go out for a walk. Since Master Qi is the son-in-law's friend, he will know what to do." Tian Zhu said, "I will protect them. Lian Qiao, you will go with me. Dezhu will stay in the Fu. If you meet Liao Meng on the street, I am afraid there will be trouble." Tian Zhu's words had always been short. As a former member of the embroidered uniform guard, Tian Zhu surprised everyone by standing firmly on Dewdrop's side. In her opinion, Liao Meng had ulterior motives. This matter was most likely aimed at Dezhu. It was better for Dezhu not to go out these days. Who knew what kind of tricks that woman had up her sleeves? If Dezhu went out, she would not be tricked. Dezhu also knew that Tian Zhu was worried about her. Her heart warmed and she agreed with a smile. After they finished packing, they went out of the Fu's main gate. In the room, a young man was sitting in front of a chessboard, playing chess with himself. From a distance, the man's side profile looked very beautiful, especially his sharp chin, which seemed to be full of beauty. His lips were bright red, as if they had just been smeared with rouge. However, when one looked closer, the beauty was destroyed by a pair of green fox eyes. Half of his face was covered with a mask, and he seemed to be staring at the chess game in front of him leisurely. It was unknown when a person appeared in the room and whispered, "Darren, Jiang Wan and Qi Feng have left the Fu. The room was silent for a long time. The man holding the chessboard held a chess piece in one hand and frowned as he carefully studied the chess game, as if considering where to start. After a while, he smiled slightly, put the chess piece in the center, and said, "Go out." The people in the room quickly retreated. The man looked at the chess game in front of him, and the smile on his lips became more and more charming. It seemed to contain some kind of profound meaning. He stared at the chessboard for a while, then suddenly reached out and flicked his sleeves. The chess pieces on the chessboard were instantly disrupted, and one by one, they fell to the ground, making a crisp sound. The man seemed to enjoy it very much. He closed his eyes and listened quietly. After a long time, he raised his eyes again and looked at the windowsill. There was a pot of orchid on the windowsill. The white petals of the orchid were slightly stretched out, and as if they were alive, they trembled gently. In this gloomy room, it was like a ray of light, exuding a strange fragrance. The man smiled slightly and whispered, "Attacking the heart is the best, a woman." This time, his words were full of contempt. While the capital was filled with rumors and slanders, the palace was strangely calm. The emperor went to court as usual. He reviewed the memorials that needed to be reviewed. He scolded the insensible officials that needed to be scolded and beheaded those that needed to be beheaded. He promoted the officials that he liked and rewarded them when they needed to be rewarded. However, some of the more attentive officials realized that the emperor hadn't asked about the affairs of the court for a long time. Now, there were only 2 princes left. In fact, the emperor had even changed his warm attitude towards the 13th prince, Xian Pei. Now, he didn't even care about the other 2 princes. Whether it was in court or in private, the 2 princes seemed to have been forgotten. Therefore, the officials were all confused. Those who had daughters in the palace would think of ways to get them to bring back a message. What was the emperor's intention now? Unexpectedly, the news brought back by the women was even more dismal. Not only the 2 princes, but the emperor also rarely went to the palace. There were very few concubines that could get close to him. Now, other than the ice beauty Mu Shiro, the only one who could get close to the emperor was the little beauty Dong Yinger, but that was only because she was good at cooking. The women in the palace complained that they had let down the palace because of the lack of beauties, but the officials of the previous dynasty smelled something unusual. These officials had seen much of the world. The emperor's seemingly small action might have some hidden meaning, such as his cold treatment of the 2 princes. Although it was strange, the officials would not give up their support for the 2 princes just because of the emperor's cold treatment. Now, it was a gamble. They were afraid that they would choose the wrong side. If they bet correctly, then they would win, and riches would be within reach. Therefore, the requests for the appointment of the crown prince still flew to the emperor's desk like snowflakes. In the room, Mingyu looked at Xian Pei, who was sitting in front of the table practicing calligraphy. Now that everyone had chosen their side, and Xianli was using all kinds of methods, be it forceful or tempting, all in order to win people over to his side, Xian Pei seemed to be abnormally relaxed. Even if the emperor didn't summon him, he was happy to be at ease. All day in the room, he practiced calligraphy and rested, as if he really was a prince. If it weren't for the fact that Mingyu and Chao Yang were Xian Pei's trusted aides and knew of his hidden ambitions, they would have thought that this handsome boy with a face full of smiles really didn't have many plans and was just a slightly intelligent and noble young master. Chapter 227. Mingyu said, "Your Highness, today Cabinet Elder Wang and Prime Minister Chiu both sent people to 8th Prince's residence. They stayed for 2 hours before coming out. This is the second time." Xian Pei made a sound of acknowledgement and continued to write his characters in ink without a care. Chaoyang and Mingyue looked at each other. Although palace maids should not discuss matters of their masters, Mingyue and Chaoyang were sent by Xiao Xiao to help Xian Pei, and Mingyue were old people in the palace. Sometimes, the fight for the throne wasn't just a fight between 2 princes. It was a fight between two forces. If one of them lost, there would still be people supporting him. Thus, the fight for the throne would often end in rivers of blood. The sacrifices and cruelty were all for the sake of that position. Since he was one of Xian Pei's people, he would have to fight with Xian Li sooner or later. The day when the two of them would fight each other would come sooner or later. What he had to do now was to increase his chances of winning before that day came. Xian Pei's nonchalant attitude would make anyone who didn't know the situation feel that he was unreliable and not worth following. Compared to Xian Li's large number of followers and aides, Xian Pei's methods of recruiting talents. It should be said that he did not take the initiative to recruit talents. It was always people who wanted to come to him. As a matter of fact, Cabinet Elder Wang and Prime Minister Qiu had always secretly supported Xian Pei. Now that the emperor treated the two princes coldly, Xian Li's troops were growing stronger and stronger, but Xian Pei didn't make any movements. He also didn't offer any benefits to the ministers who came to seek refuge. Over time, those people gradually disappeared. Cabinet Elder Wang and Prime Minister Qiu were originally a large force. From the looks of it, they had already sided with Xian Li. More and more people left on his side, but Xian Li was not anxious at all. Your Highness, Chao Yang was somewhat anxious. Cabinet Elder Wang and Prime Minister Qiu are obviously your people, but they still left like this. This is really burning the bridge after crossing the river. Xian Pei smiled but was not moved. Ming Yu was also very puzzled, but she knew that this young man was not a stupid person. His scheming and forbearance were beyond the imagination of ordinary people. There must be a reason why he did this. She said, Your Highness does not seem worried at all. Xian Pei finally finished the last stroke and heaved a sigh of relief. He put down the brush and looked at Ming Yu. What doubts do you have? Xian Li's attitude towards her was stricter than towards Chao Yang because she was Xiao Xiao's person. However, he valued her more than Chao Yang because there were many things that he needed her to do. She was agile and could do better. Hearing this, Ming Yu knelt down and said, This servant does not understand why your highness does not take the initiative to recruit talents, and does not know how to tempt those who come to seek refuge. What I do not understand is that at this critical juncture, the 8th prince is constantly making moves, but your highness only stays in the house and does not make a move. You have too many questions. Xian Pei looked at her and said slowly. He played with the thumb ring on his hand and suddenly smiled. However, your highness is in a good mood today, so I can answer you. It's just that Xiao Xiao's people don't even know this little thing. It really broadens my horizons. Xian Pei was always changing his ways to insult Xiao Xiao whenever he had the chance. Ming Yu had heard it many times, and treated it as a child's fight, so she did not really take it to heart. Xian Pei saw that Ming Yu's expression did not change, and did not get angry. It seemed that he also felt that it was somewhat boring. He coughed and said, Talents are not actively recruited. If I want to contend against Xian Li, who do you think I need to support the most? Talents? Ming Yu did not speak. At any time, no matter if it was a fight for the throne or not, a wise ruler would always think of ways to select talents. Talents were naturally fought over by the rulers. Xian Pei smiled faintly. Wrong. Talents. The reason why talents are talents is because they need to be appreciated by a wise ruler. This is not a peaceful and prosperous era, nor is it a peaceful world. This is a battle of life and death. If you are not careful, you will lose everything. I think, talents are important, but it is not as important as ambition. Ambition? Ming Yu asked. Ambition. Xian Pei sat on the chair. His body was thin and weak, and had not fully developed. Sitting on the wide chair was somewhat awkward. But his long sleeves flowed down from the chair and covered the floor. His indolence caused Ming Yu to be in a trance. She felt that the person sitting in front of her was not a young lad, but a mature and wise man. A thin, hungry wolf and a well-trained hound, Xian Pei said faintly, in the days when there's no need to fight for anything, a smart hound is certainly good, but when it comes to robbing, killing, and robbing, it's probably much better to bring along a thin, hungry wolf. Your so-called talents are hunting dogs, and ambitious people are hungry wolves. What I am facing is a battle of life and death. It is a battle of flesh and blood. Whoever is more ferocious, the more advantageous it is to me. You can use meat to recruit hunting dogs. But for a hungry wolf, you will never use meat to recruit it. Because what it wants, is to kill the other party. Mingyu was silent for a while, then asked. Although a hungry wolf is ferocious, but in the future, it will inevitably develop a bestial nature, and devour its master. There will not be such a chance. Xian Pei said. Mingyu was startled. She heard Xian Pei's voice coming from above her. After the prey is dead, there is no need for the hungry wolf to exist. Naturally, it will find an opportunity to kill. Hearing this, Mingyu's body trembled. She did not expect this young lad to be so decisive. He could easily say that the cunning rabbit should be cooked. Although these words were despicable and cruel, it was the best start on the road to becoming an emperor. Xian Pei's courage had already surprised her, but he was still so decisive. Xian Pei looked at the dazed Mingyu. Ambition is only used to deal with enemies. If they have ambitions for what is mine, and secretly covet it, I will destroy their ambitions forever. Chao Yang, who was standing far away, heard Xian Pei's words. She could not help but feel her heart tighten. She suppressed the pressure in her heart. She had always known that the 13th prince was not simple, but she did not know that his wisdom and methods had already reached the level of a future emperor. His age was no longer a flaw, it could even be an excellent cover. Then why did your highness not name a price? Mingyu asked. If there was a price, wouldn't it be easier to recruit ambitious people? How do you think my forces are compared to Xian Li's? Xian Pei asked. Mingyu was startled, but she quickly regained her senses. She knew that Xian Pei was a person who could see things clearly, and there was no point in lying. She honestly said, the 8th prince's forces are stronger. That's right. His forces are stronger. If I name a price, once he knows the price, he just needs to raise it a little. With his forces, he can also do this. Those who are tempted by my price, when they see a higher price, will definitely follow. On the contrary, wouldn't it be better to wait for the highest price and obtain a priceless treasure? Xian Pei smiled. Let them never know their own value, forever have hope for the future, and work even harder. These people who are bought over priceless treasures are things that Xianli will never be able to buy with a tangible price. Mingyu seemed to understand, but she did not. Xian Pei continued, do you think that the number of people following Xianli is increasing? Do you know that this is not a good thing for him? Mingyu nodded, then shook her head. The same amount of money, when divided between two people, will be much more beneficial. There are many people behind Xianli, but the more people there are, when Xianli gets what he wants, the smaller the contribution each person will get. On the contrary, there are not many people behind me, and if I succeed in the future, those people will get a larger share of the benefits. In other words, the people standing behind me are all driven by the greater benefits. These people driven by the greater benefits will never be moved by Xian Li's small benefits. Because there is no price, but because of the effort they put in, they will give birth to the idea of gambling. Have you ever seen a person who gives up halfway in gambling? Generally not. The people behind me, everyone has the idea of gambling, so they are the most stable part. Mingyu listened as if she was enlightened, but she was faintly surprised and did not understand. She looked at Xian Pei and said, but Cabinet Elder Wang and Prime Minister Qiu, these are people who are driven by small benefits. Even if they do not leave today, one day they will bring harm to me because of the benefits in front of them. It is better to kick them out early. Such a short-sighted blade, I believe, even if Xianli holds it in his hands, he will not feel happy. Xian Pei suddenly thought of something, and suddenly smiled. Besides, do you think it is a good thing that there are more and more people behind Xianli? I think Father in the palace is really full of anger now. The anger of the Son of Heaven is not something that anyone can bear. Your Majesty. Mingyu was shocked. Right now, the Emperor did not seem to care much about the two princes and did not have much to say about the matter of changing the crown prince. Could it be that he was still secretly paying attention to this matter? Mingyu thought for a moment and said, since His Majesty is paying attention to this matter, I heard from Eunuch Li that there is no end to the impeachment of His Highness regarding the matter in Qing'an County a few days ago. His Majesty is very angry and most likely holds some displeasure towards His Highness. Should we think of a way to refute or find an opportunity to impeach 8th Prince? Before Xian Hua was born, there was a period of time when the Emperor thought highly of Xian Pei. Whenever there was any major matter in court, he would test Xian Pei's opinion. The snowstorm in Qing'an County had been severe. At that time, the Emperor had asked Xian Pei, and Xian Pei had written a memorial on how to deal with the snowstorm. The memorial was written in a standard manner, and there were some novel parts, but it was not overflowing with talent. In the end, it was accepted by the Emperor. As a matter of fact, news had come from Qing'an County a few days ago that Xian Pei's methods had not been of much use. As a result, the 8th Prince's subordinates immediately seized this opportunity to impeach Xian Pei on the grounds that he was young and playful, using the important matters of the people's lives as a joke. Naturally, there were old officials who had followed the Emperor for many years. Every memorial they wrote was full of heartache and hatred. Those who did not know would think that Xian Pei had committed some heinous crime. However, being impeached by so many people would inevitably leave a bad impression on the Emperor. When Mingyu thought of this, she still felt uneasy. Go and arrange a few people. Tell the people on my side to send me the memorials as well. Xian Pei shook his sleeves carelessly. Impeach 8th Prince as well? Chao Yang could not help but ask. Her expression was one of joy. In her opinion, the 8th Prince's subordinates had not been right to hit him when he was down. Unexpectedly, Xian Pei shook his head and said, impeach me. What? Chao Yang cried out in shock. She immediately realized that she had overstepped her boundaries. She hurriedly knelt down and begged for forgiveness. Mingyu also frowned, not understanding why Xian Pei had done this. Xian Pei smiled and slowly moved his lips. Mingyu froze and felt a chill run down her spine. She raised her eyes to look at the young man sitting on the throne. Half of the young man's body was submerged in a soft cushion as he carelessly supported his chin with his hand. The sunlight outside the window dimmed and half of the young man's body fell into the shadows. He was like a silent stone statue, sturdy and heavy. He was like a lonely and cruel emperor sitting on a high throne separated by layers of curtains, green tiles and glazed glass. A true emperor. He smiled and said, everyone submit to Xian Li. Let him see who the world belongs to. The sun set in the west in the blink of an eye. In the early spring, the sky darkened early. Jiang Wan and Qi Feng went out of the small shop on the street and returned to the Wang Fu. Perhaps it was because Jiang Wan had not been out for a long time, or perhaps it was because Qi Feng was a humorous person, the two of them got along very well. Not only did they visit the Yibao Gu, they also visited the other shops. Previously, during the wedding, she had also gone to take a look at the shops that Xian Pei had given her. Jiang Wan did not have any other thoughts. Although Xian Pei had given these shops to her, she currently did not lack money. She only wanted to manage them well and return them to Xian Pei in the future. If one day Xian Pei really sat in that position, even if he did not sit in that position, his environment was destined to make him need these things more than Jiang Wan. In Jiang Ruan's eyes, Xian Pei would always be her child. They visited the shop together with Qi Feng and bought some things. They even ate something in the shop outside before returning. When they returned to the gate of the Fu, it was already very late. Qi Feng held a pile of trivial things in his hands, which were all bought by Jiang Wan today. In order to avoid suspicion, the two of them did not take the carriage. Jiang Wan did not know why today she was in high spirits and bought a lot of things. It had to be said that now that she was not short of money, it was really refreshing to buy things. In this way, all the heavy work fell to Qi Feng. Qi Feng hugged all the things. When they reached the gate of the Fu, Jiang Wan smiled and said, "Give them to me. You have worked hard today." Qi Feng smiled bitterly, "It's not hard at all. Even if I have to work like a cow or a horse, I would not dare to refuse. If I don't do it, I will be scolded by third brother." Jiang Wan was startled, and Qi Feng also realized that he had said the wrong thing. For a moment, he was at a loss of what to do. Jiang Wan reached out to take the things in Qi Feng's hand, but she did not expect that her foot would slip. Qi Feng rushed to help her, and the things fell to the ground. Qi Feng grabbed Jiang Ruan's hand and looked at the woman in front of him, but he was a little absent-minded. Wasn't leaving these past few days also a form of escape? It was just that he was afraid that he would sink deeper and deeper. Jiang Wan was able to be unperturbed as she pleased, but no matter what, he was unable to do the same. Such close contact caused him to be somewhat dazed for a moment. Such a scene was unintentional, but in the eyes of others, it seemed somewhat ambiguous. They only heard a familiar voice, "Young master is back." Accompanied by the sound of the door opening, housekeeper Lin's head also poked out. After seeing Jiang Wan and Qi Feng, he could not help but be surprised. Perhaps what surprised him even more was the posture of Jiang Wan and Qi Feng. Jiang Wan raised her eyes and saw that Xiao Xiao was standing a few feet away, quietly looking in her direction. The sky was dark and the lantern at the Fu's entrance was swaying gently, causing his expression to be somewhat indistinct. Qi Feng took a step back and said with a smile, "Third sister-in-law, don't be careless next time. It's done. Since third brother is back, I will also leave." After saying this, he waved his hand and turned to leave. Jiang Wan glanced at Xiao Xiao. Housekeeper Lin's face was stiff. Jiang Wan pushed the door and walked in. When she passed by Housekeeper Lin, she said, "Pick up the things and send them to the house." "Sorry for troubling Housekeeper Lin." After Jiang Wan left, Housekeeper Lin ordered the servants to pick up the things that had fallen on the ground. He was about to step forward to greet Xiao Xiao and say a few words to ease the situation, but Xiao Xiao swept past him without saying a word. The cold air on his body was really a bit shocking. Naturally, this was not the cold air brought by the frost and snow outside. Housekeeper Lin shivered and wanted to cry but had no tears. How could the young madam, who was usually alienated from others, be so close to Qi Feng? This Qi Feng did not act properly. Could it be that he did not know the principle of not flirting with a friend's wife? No, Qi Feng was Master Shixiang. Naturally, he would not do such a cruel and unscrupulous thing. It must have been a misunderstanding. But why the fuck did it have to be such a coincidence? This was the first time the husband and wife met at night since the Cold War. Usually, Xiao Xiao went out during the day, and when he came back at night, Jiang Wan would already be asleep. Naturally, there was no chance to talk. Who knew that Xiao Xiao would come back so early today? After Jiang Wan washed up, she did not see Xiao Xiao in the room. When she asked Tianzhu said that Xiao Xiao was in the study. She did not know what Xiao Xiao had been busy with these past few days. Perhaps he really had something to do in the study. But today, something like this happened again. It seemed a little strange for Xiao Xiao to go to the study at this time. Xiao Xiao was probably sulking. In the past, Jiang Wan thought that Xiao Xiao was a little cute, but after experiencing the matter with Jin Air and Lu Zhu, she subconsciously thought that Xiao Xiao did not trust her. No woman could accept her husband doubting her, especially when it came to his innocence. Jiang Yuan also had a stubborn temper. She only made a sound of agreement and went to sleep first. She had no intention of going to the study to talk. However, housekeeper Lin, who was full of hope, waited outside the room for her to reconcile with Jiang Yuan, waited in vain for the whole night. It was night. Above the Yao family's mansion in the capital, heavy curtains were stacked on top of each other, and the bamboo and wood gave off a faint glow. In the courtyard of the Yao family's young miss, the sweet sound of a zither floated out. Every part of this courtyard was decorated beautifully and exquisitely. Everywhere was a display of elegance. Even the carp sculpture by the side of the pond was vivid and lifelike. This courtyard had originally been created by the Yao family's young miss, Yao Ninian. Master Yao obviously had high expectations for craftsmen, which was why such an exquisite courtyard had been created. This also indirectly showed that this Yao Ninian was certainly the apple of Governor Yao's eye, which was why he had so ostentatiously fulfilled her long-cherished wish. At this moment, the sound of the zither in the courtyard matched the scenery in the courtyard. Yao Ninian was extraordinarily intelligent, and she had always been proficient in the 4 arts. It was just that she was not very proficient in them. If Jiang Su had been the talented woman of the capital, then Yao Ninian would have been the most intelligent woman in everyone's hearts. The most intelligent woman might not have been the best in the 4 arts, but inexplicably, she was more respected than the talented woman. 2 servant girls standing far away were quietly discussing, "This song is really beautiful. How come I've never heard young miss play it before?" "Stupid," the other servant girl said in a low voice, "it must have been created by herself. Our young miss has always been intelligent." If this sound of the zither were to spread outside, I think that the title of the #1 zither maiden in the capital would have to be given to someone else. What nonsense are you talking about? What kind of status does that zither maiden have? How could she be mentioned in the same breath as our young miss? The smaller servant girl said, "In recent years, young miss seems to like playing the zither in the courtyard more and more. I don't know why, could it be?" She thought of something and hurriedly shut her mouth, but her expression was one of uncontrollable worry. In a pavilion in the courtyard, a woman's long sleeves fluttered in the wind. The corners of her robe were turned up to reveal tiny, dazzling, and exquisite silk patterns. A pair of slender hands flew up and down the strings of the zither. The melody was like the tinkling of spring water, pleasing to the ears, and seemed to be able to play into one's heart. After a while, the song ended, but Yao Ninian did not withdraw her hands. Her jade-like, stuttering hands were still on the zither. Her brows were calm, but there was something in her eyes that could not be described clearly, as if it could penetrate into one's heart. The corners of her lips curled up as she looked at the zither in front of her. However, she seemed to have thought of something else. Among the ashes on the ground, there was a piece of paper that had been used to practice calligraphy. Yao Ninian had always demanded perfection from herself. Among the ashes, there seemed to be something else. It was just that the unfamiliar handwriting had been mixed in with the ashes and vanished along with the fire, leaving nothing behind. Yao Ninian slowly opened her mouth to speak. It was not clear whether she was speaking to someone else or herself. "Heart like a boulder, heart like a boulder. When 2 boulders collide, 200 will be injured. Jiang Yuan, a person who can guess people's hearts." Her smile gradually gave rise to a sense of contempt. What a joke. In this world, there were indeed people who could play with people's hearts. Originally, she had thought that since Jiang Yuan was so famous, she would naturally have something special about her. Now, it seemed that it was nothing more than a false rumor. That woman could not withstand a single blow, and was really nothing to be afraid of. There were many dark places in a person's heart. Perhaps it was harmless, but when those dark places were infinitely magnified, under the right opportunity, it could lead to irreparable mistakes. The bait has been cast, the small shrimp has also been hooked up, Yao Nianyan stretched out a hand and lightly stroked the zither strings. However, when she reached the last string, her hand suddenly exerted force, and the zither let out a sharp cry before it snapped. Yao Nianyan unhurriedly plucked the short string and smiled faintly. You may begin. Chapter 228. Early the next morning, Jiang Wan had just eaten breakfast and had yet to reach the study when someone from the gatehouse came to report that he was carrying a bundle in his hand. He only said that it was for the master of Jinying Wang Fu. When she asked who it was, the gatehouse could not answer and only said that it seemed to be the carriage of the Mo family Fu. This Mo family was naturally Mo Tsong's Fu in the capital. The master of Jinying Wang Fu was indeed Xiao Xiao, but now that Jiang Wan was in charge, the gatehouse did not hesitate and handed it over to Jiang Wan. Jiang Wan returned to the study and threw the bundle on the desk. However, Tianzhu said, "Young madam, why don't you open it? If there are other important matters, it would not be good to delay it." In Tianzhu's view, if Mo Tsong came to deliver something, it was probably related to official business. Jiang Wan was not an ignorant housewife. There were some things that she could deal with very well. Now was a troubled time and time was very precious. Xiao Xiao would probably return late at night, so it was better for Jiang Wan to open it now and see what it was. Lian Qiao also hurriedly said, "Yes, young madam, after all, it is a matter of the Fu." Lian Qiao's thoughts were not as profound as Tianzhu's. She only thought that Jiang Wan and Xiao Xiao were somewhat estranged and could not continue to be so indifferent. This matter might be an opportunity. Jiang Wan thought for a moment, then brought the bundle in front of her eyes and slowly opened it. There was nothing in the bundle, only a coat. This coat was a jet-black embroidered robe. The corner of the robe was embroidered with a dark golden qilin. It was Xiao Xiao's robe. Next to the robe was a letter. Mo Tsong returning Xiao Xiao's robe for no reason was a strange matter. Moreover, there was also a letter. Jiang Wan did not hesitate and opened the letter at the side. When the letter was unfolded, there were only two simple words on it, "Many thanks." It was the graceful small regular script that women often used, but the handwriting was neat and full of charm. With just a superficial glance, one could already feel that it was a good handwriting. It was just a letter of thanks, but the handwriting was already so unusual. The content itself was also very thought-provoking. As soon as Dewdrop saw it, her expression changed greatly. She had no choice but to think about it. Perhaps she would have found it strange in the past, but now, when she saw these things, she could not help but have a thought. With Jean Eyre as an example, how could she not be nervous? Her expression changed immediately. Tianzhu's gaze also moved, but he did not speak. Lian Qiao opened her mouth, obviously not knowing how to deal with the current situation. Before the three of them could open their mouths, they saw Jiang Wan pick up the robe and slowly bring it to the tip of her nose. Lian Qiao and Lu Zhu stared at her nervously. Although Tianzhu's expression was not as nervous as Lian Qiao and Lu Zhu, she did not even blink, refusing to miss a single expression from Jiang Wan. After a moment, Jiang Wan put down Xiao Xiao's robe. From beginning to end, her expression had not changed. She threw the robe back into the bundle and asked Lu Zhu, "Where is the gift for the General Fu that I prepared a few days ago?" A few days ago, the Zhao family's third mistress had a pregnancy pulse. Zhao Feizhou was already so old, yet the third mistress was still pregnant. This was a matter that made the entire General Fu happy. When the good news came, Jiang Wan also ordered people to prepare the gift and was prepared to personally make a trip. But recently, she had almost forgotten about this matter. Lu Zhu was surprised, "It has already been prepared." "It is exactly according to the gift list that Steward Lin gave. Does Miss want to take a look now?" "No need," Jiang Wan stood up, "let's go to the General Fu today." Lian Qiao's heart thumped. Obviously, she had faintly guessed in the direction that Lu Zhu was thinking. Although there was some hesitation, Jiang Wan did not wait for them to speak and took the lead to leave. The few of them looked at each other. Finally, it was Tianzhu who walked forward and stood in front of the desk. She hesitated for a moment before reaching out to pick up the robe. She imitated Jiang Wan and waved it under her nose. "What is it?" Lian Xiao asked anxiously. Tianzhu's brows were tightly knitted, but she did not seem to fully understand. She asked with slight doubt, "Orchid?" Just like that, Jiang Wan left the door. Steward Lin was angry but did not dare to say anything. He probably wanted to go forward and dissuade her, but in the end, when he saw Jiang Ruan's cold expression, he did not dare to go forward. In the end, he could only shrink behind the vermilion pillar of the Wang Fu's main gate and use his fingers to scratch the paint. Jin Si stood at the side with his arms crossed. Watching Steward Lin's actions, he could not help but say, "Hey, old Lin, if this pillar is scratched, will it be deducted from your salary to repair it?" Steward Lin's actions stopped abruptly, but he immediately put on a stern face and lectured, "What do you know? This old man is just worried. You, little girl, do not understand. How can you share this old man's worries? All day long, you don't know what you should do and only know how to make noise." In the end, he was lecturing Jin Si. Jin Si was stunned for a moment and did not know whether to laugh or cry. "Is there a need for you to be so nervous? Young madam is only going to the General Fu. It's just a trip to her maiden home. Why do you act as if something big happened? Those who don't know would think that something happened to young madam. That's why I said that you're blind." Steward Lin clasped his hands behind his back and looked at her. "Do you know why young madam returned to the General's Fu?" "I do. Third young madam of the Zhao family is pregnant, so young madam went to congratulate her." "This is a joyous occasion," Jin Si replied. "If she really wanted to congratulate her, why would young madam wait until you arrived? She would have brought young master back with her a long time ago. Today, when she returned, it was obvious that she went back to her maiden home in a fit of pique after an argument. I heard from Lian Xiao last night that it really made me anxious." As Steward Lin spoke, he became a little angry. Everything was fine, but he angered his wife all the way to her maiden home. "Young master really hasn't learned any of my cleverness. Women need to be coaxed. I don't think he's willing to coax her anymore." Hearing this, Jin Si began to ponder seriously. He looked at Steward Lin and said, "Speaking of which, I also feel that too many things have happened recently. First, it was Jean Eyre and Lu Zhu. Now, it's young madam and young master. This is quite a coincidence, but I don't know how it all happened. Is it because the feng shui is bad? Let's hurry up and have someone go to the temple to burn the incense of marriage. This Fu cannot tolerate such a thing." Steward Lin also expressed his agreement. On the other side, Jiang Wan brought Tianzhu and a few others to the General Fu. Her arrival was also very sudden, and she did not have any plans for the invitation. She did not even let the manservant go to greet her eldest brother in advance. However, the Zhao family members were still very happy to see her, especially the few grandmothers of the Zhao family, who happily went out to welcome her. Jiang Wan ordered people to carry the gift for the third daughter-in-law out. Naturally, there would not be a lack of guests. Everyone in the third branch was courteous, and the gift had been written very thoughtfully. No one could find any fault with it, and it was very generous. This was Steward Lin's handiwork. Steward Lin had always been good at writing gifts. When the eldest grandmother led Jiang Wan into the Fu, she first wanted to see the master of the Fu, Zhao Guang. However, Zhao Guang was not in the main hall. The eldest grandmother smiled and said, "Father is playing chess in the backyard. Ah Wan, follow me." When she really led them to the backyard, Jiang Wan was slightly startled. This was because the person playing chess with Zhao Guang was Jiang Xing. The two of them had not seen each other for a long time. Ever since the end of the year, Jiang Wan had been busy helping Xian Pei gain a firm foothold. Jiang Xing's daily official duties in the military camp were also rather busy. Perhaps it was because of Zhao Jin, but he did not have to keep Jiang Wan under his eyes like he used to do in the past. Thus, this meeting between the siblings was rather sudden. However, it was obvious that feelings would not grow distant just because of the distance. When Jiang Xing saw Jiang Wan, he immediately ignored his unfinished chess game and stood up to take large strides towards Jiang Wan. He said happily, "Ah Wan, why did you suddenly come? Why didn't you find someone to tell us in advance?" Zhao Guang was so angry that he stomped his feet behind him. "Stinky brat, hurry up and come back. This game is not over yet, where are you going to run off to?" "That's enough, grandfather," another voice interrupted, "with your lousy chess game, only cousin Gu has the patience to play chess with you. So what if it's over? In the end, it's still a loss." Zhao Guang could not tolerate others saying that he was not good at chess, so he immediately scowled at Zhao Feizhou and scolded him. However, Zhao Feizhou made a funny face and ran away like a wisp of smoke. Zhao Feizhou's temperament was 100% inherited from Zhao Yuanfeng's temperament. In short, he was a rash and reckless person. Zhao Guang did not chase after him. When he saw Jiang Wan, he coughed, unable to suppress the joy in his eyes. "Wan girl, you're back." Jiang Wan nodded and stepped forward to exchange greetings. The satisfied expression on Zhao Guang's face deepened. In all fairness, although Jiang Wan did not spend much time at the general's fu, this was actually more beneficial to the general's fu. Maintaining an appropriate amount of time would not bring any trouble to the general's fu. Although her attitude was usually polite and distant, the gifts she gave during the New Year and other festivals were always very thoughtful. It was said that one's intentions could be seen from a person's gift list. It was from these gifts that one could not pick out anything wrong with. It really made one unable to get angry. One would only feel that this young lady was compromising to protect them, and that she was only doing this. On the contrary, it made one feel even closer to Jiang Wan and feel sorry for her. Of course, the people of the general's fu naturally did not know that every gift list was drawn up by housekeeper Lin. In their opinion, Jiang Wan was exceptionally intelligent, so it was not strange that the gift list came from her. However, it was somewhat impossible for a housekeeper to draw up such a gift list. One must know that drawing up a gift list was not an easy task. Many young ladies of noble families began to learn how to manage a household by drawing up a gift list. If it was done well, they might be able to establish a good relationship. If it was not done well, they might miss out on an important opportunity to climb up the ranks. After Zhao Guang and Jiang Wan spoke, Madame Li came over again. She pulled her into the main hall and could not help but ask about the recent situation. Madame Li truly loved Jiang Wan. She had doubled the amount of regret she had with Zhao Mei to compensate Jiang Wan. Zhao Yulong and Zhao Yi had also returned. Zhao San was somewhat surprised. Originally, she had thought that Jiang Wan would not come, but today, she had suddenly come. The entire Zhao family had gathered together. Madame Li was very happy and ordered people to go to the kitchen to prepare more dishes. However, Zhao Yuanping asked, "Wan girl, why did Xiao Wangyan not accompany you today?" Everyone looked at Jiang Wan. Jiang Wan smiled and said, "He is very busy. Today, I suddenly came on a whim. I will have to ask him to come and meet grandfather and grandmother another day." Xiao Xiao was indeed very busy. The Zhao family all attended court, and they knew that he had always been busy in the capital. He was not in the capital all year round, so Zhao Yuanping did not ask any more questions. When it was time to eat, the whole family toasted each other and it was very lively. Jiang Wan sat in the middle of them and was slightly absent-minded. These past few days, the atmosphere in Jining Wang Fu had been foul and chaotic. Whether it was the brocade guards, the maidservants by her side, or even herself. The lively and amiable atmosphere in front of others formed a sharp contrast with the cold and distant atmosphere behind others. She had never felt it before, but now, she could feel the difference more and more. Perhaps she did not know when, but her heart had also begun to be warmed by others, at least towards those who were close to her. While eating, Madame Li asked tentatively, "Ah Ruan, it is getting late today. Why don't you not go back tonight?" Her words were said with some caution. She stared at Jiang Ruan's expression without blinking, and her gaze was filled with unconcealable expectation. Jiang Ruan suddenly smiled and said, "Okay." Madame Li breathed a sigh of relief and immediately ordered the servants, "Hurry, hurry, hurry, clean up the room in Fragrant Garden. I just had people sweep it a few days ago, so it must have accumulated dust these days." Fragrant Garden was the courtyard that Zhao Mei had lived in when she was a young lady in the Fu. After Zhao Mei left, the courtyard had not been abandoned. For more than 10 years, it had been waiting for a person who would never return. Every few days, she would have people clean up the room. It seemed that only relatives could do this. "Mother, why are you in such a hurry?" The second daughter-in-law smiled and said, "Who would have people clean up the room when they are eating? There is no need to rush. After dinner, eldest saw, third saw, and mother can continue chatting. I will have people clean up the room over there. I still have a lot of interesting stories here, but I don't know if our Ruan will like them." She was a straightforward person, and her words were full of smiles, which always made people feel refreshed. Jiang Ruan smiled and said, "Xiao Xiao has been very busy these past few days. Almost every day, he is not at the Fu. I also intend to stay here for a few more days. I only hope that sisters-in-law will not mind my intrusion." "It's no trouble, no trouble," third daughter-in-law was pleasantly surprised when she heard this. "That's great. Every day, I am trapped in the room and have no one to talk to. It's good that our Ruan is here, I finally have company." When second daughter-in-law heard this, she pretended to be angry and said, "What are you saying? Am I not a person every day? I have been accompanying you all these days in vain." Third daughter-in-law hurriedly smiled and begged for mercy. For a moment, the room was filled with cheers and laughter, and it was very lively. When night fell, she accompanied a few of her sisters-in-law and had a good chat. By then, it was already late at night. Jiang Ruan returned to Fragrant Garden and was about to freshen up and rest when she suddenly heard Tian Zhu call out in alarm, "Who is it?" Jiang Ruan turned around and saw a person walk out from the shadows of the lamp. It was Jiang Xing. He glanced at Tian Zhu and said, "You can leave first." Tian Zhu was stunned, but he also knew that Jiang Ruan and this brother of his had always had a close relationship, so he withdrew without a word. Jiang Ruan and Jiang Xing walked to the stone table in the courtyard and sat down. Jiang Ruan smiled and asked, "Eldest brother, you are not sleeping at this late hour. Could it be that you want to chat with me?" "Ah Ruan," Jiang Xing's expression became serious, "did he bully you?" Jiang Ruan was startled for a moment before she regained her senses. The he that Jiang Xing was referring to was naturally Xiao Xiao. She smiled, "Eldest brother, how could he dare to bully me? It has always been me who bullies others. You are worrying too much." Without waiting for her to finish speaking, she was interrupted by Jiang Xing, "Ah Ruan, you and I are siblings born from the same mother. In this world, only the two of us are the closest. Ever since we were young, you have loved to stick to me. Although we have been separated for many years, it is not that I do not understand you. Today, in this Fu, you have behaved abnormally. When you were young and angry with me, you did not cry or make a fuss. You always quietly walked away. You are used to using silence to express your dissatisfaction and avoid direct conflict. Ah Ruan, what problem did you and Xiao Xiao have?" Jiang Xing really understood her. Even though many of her thoughts had changed in this life, after a long period of interaction and the connection between siblings born from the same mother, Jiang Xing could still see that something was wrong with her at a glance. However, Jiang Yuan was somewhat helpless. Eldest brother, there is indeed a little problem between me and him. However, if I cannot even deal with such a small problem, then you are underestimating me too much. Eldest brother can't possibly interfere in the matters between husband and wife. He did not bully me, but I saw that he was a little unhappy, so I bullied him. Seeing that Jiang Xing would not give up until he achieved his goal, Jiang Yuan told him the ins and outs of the matter, only hiding the part about the quarrel with Xiao Xiao. She said, in the end, the genie guards are his people. Love me, love my crow. Similarly, I am not happy with him joining the genie guards, so naturally, I am not happy with him. Therefore, I wanted to come out to relax and at the same time let myself calm down and think about the cause of the matter. You think? Jiang Xing looked at her in bewilderment. He lowered his head and pondered for a moment before saying, this matter is indeed a little strange. I will pay attention to it. Since this is the case, you should stay here for a few more days. Since that Xiao Xiao did not stand up for you, you deserve to be angry. He said angrily, I should teach him a lesson. Jiang Yuan smiled. Suddenly, she thought of something and said, eldest brother, there is something I need to tell you. Jiang Xing smiled and said, what is it? He suddenly looked at Jiang Yuan with surprise. Could it be that I am going to have a nephew? What are you talking about? Jiang Yuan did not know whether to laugh or cry. I want to tell you that in this struggle for the throne, between the 13th prince and the 8th prince, even if they can reluctantly maintain a neutral stance, as time goes on, it will definitely be impossible. They will have to declare a side. Eldest brother, I am standing on the 13th prince's side. Oh, Jiang Xing was somewhat disappointed. Jiang Yuan was talking about such an important matter, but he said, if you did not tell me about this matter, in the end, I would still have chosen the 13th prince's side. Why? Jiang Yuan asked doubtfully. Jiang Xing had always been a gentle and upright person. Even though he had become resolute on the battlefield, it had not obliterated the righteousness in his bones. For such a person to support another person and step into the disputes of the court was not an easy matter. Xianli has done things that are disadvantageous to you. Why would you choose him? Jiang Xing snorted. Although that Xian Pei does not appear to be easy to deal with, at least he has helped you out of trouble. Your reasoning is simple. Jiang Yuan could not help but laugh again. After exchanging a few words with Jiang Xing, she felt much more relaxed. After Jiang Xing left, she returned to her room to rest and slept well that night. For the next few days, Jiang Yuan stayed in the General Fu. It was also the first time that the people of the General Fu had seen Jiang Yuan move in. They could not wait to take out all the good things for her to make her happy. Everyone here was full of kindness towards her. This kind of kindness was not the kindness of strangers on the street, but came from the bottom of their hearts, from the kindness of family members. Therefore, Jiang Yuan was actually much happier here than in Jining Wang Fu. The General Fu only sent someone to Jining Wang Fu to inform them that Jiang Yuan would be staying here for a few more days. In Jining Wang Fu, Xiao Xiao was sitting in the study when a manservant came over and reported, Master, there is another letter from the General Fu saying that young madam will be staying there for a few more days. The manservant also wiped away his sweat. These days, housekeeper Lin had tormented these manservants who passed on the message miserably. Ever since that day when Jiang Yuan went to see the Zhao family's third mistress, she had not returned. If the first day could be said to be because it was too late to travel, then the second day could be said to be because the family had gathered together to chat. However, after this series of events, it was somewhat unbearable. The people of the General Fu were naturally open-minded and crude, so they could not see the knack behind it. However, everyone in Jining Wang Fu knew the reason behind it. Jiang Yuan only lacked a few words to clearly tell them, this Wang Fei is angry and wants to return to her maternal home. Jiang Yuan still did not return. Every time the manservant sent out by the Fu to urge her, he would only bring back one piece of news: Wang Fei does not want to leave and wants to stay for a few more days. In fact, it was not good for a married daughter to stay in her maternal home for too long. However, with the status of the General Fu and Jiang Ruan's identity, no one dared to say anything. However, housekeeper Lin was scratching his ears and cheeks in his heart. He could not wait to tie Xiao Xiao up and bring him to the General Fu to offer a humble apology so that he could coax the mistress of the Wang Fu back. Housekeeper Lin probed, "Master, when are you going to personally go to the General's residence to take a look? It's already been more than 10 days, it's not good to continue like this." He forcefully swallowed the words "open up branches and leaves" at the end of his sentence. Xiao Xiao did not speak. He was used to having an expressionless face. Housekeeper Lin, on the other hand, did not know what he meant at the moment. A few days ago, Qi Feng came to look for Jiang Yuan once. Qi Feng did not know that Jiang Yuan had returned to the General Fu. He only brought a large box of novelties with him, saying that it was specially left for Jiang Yuan by a friend. At that time, Xiao Xiao's face was as black as the bottom of a pot. His attitude towards Qi Feng was also surprisingly cold. Housekeeper Lin felt a little guilty and did not know how Qi Feng felt about it. However, Qi Feng left very quickly. The expression between the two of them was very unpleasant. Xiao Xiao's relationship with his martial brothers had always been good. His conduct could be considered righteous. This was the first time that he had a black face with Qi Feng. Housekeeper Lin muttered in his heart, Xiao Xiao's appearance clearly showed that he cared about Jiang Yuan. But why could he not put down his pride? Just as he was thinking, he saw Genie hand over a post. The posts here were generally under Housekeeper Lin's control. Genie felt a little strange when he took the post. Housekeeper Lin was shocked. Could it be that Genie wanted to steal his work? He quickly stole a glance. With his superior eyesight, he could tell with just a glance that the invitation was from the Mo residence. There were probably a few other people casually mentioned on it. There was a name that Steward Lin felt was somewhat familiar, but he couldn't recall it no matter how hard he tried. While he was still in a dilemma, he heard Xiao Xiao take a look and say, "Prepare the horse." Was he going to go just like that? Genie quickly brought the cloak. Xiao Xiao left in a hurry and did not stop. Housekeeper Lin stood there in a daze. Suddenly, he slapped his thigh and said, "Hey! Yao family! Isn't that the bandit family that wanted to destroy young master's flower?" The moon was bright and the stars were sparse. The night was as dark as ink. Lian Qiao went outside to prepare hot water for Jiang Yuan to bathe. Tian Zhu stood outside while Jiang Yuan stood in the courtyard. The early spring wind was still somewhat chilly, but it was not as painful as it used to be. The night air was also fresh. The walls of the courtyard were covered with moon radishes. The flowers were small and thin, emitting a faint fragrance. In the night, it was very enchanting. Lu Zhu walked under the moon radish, wanting to pluck a few petals. Suddenly, there was a putong sound on the opposite side of the wall. She jumped in fright. Just as she was about to shout, she saw a big black tabby cat running nimbly from that side. "So it's a cat," Lu Zhu patted her chest. When she turned her head, she heard Jiang Yuan say, "You go in first, I'll sit for a while." Lu Zhu carried the basket back to the house. Jiang Yuan then turned around. The moment Lu Zhu entered the house, there was already an additional slender figure under the moon radish vines. That figure stood under the moon radish vines. His posture was tall and straight, as if he had been standing there since the beginning. Jiang Yuan was not surprised. She just stood a few steps away from him and looked over in silence. The dark clouds gradually dispersed and the moonlight gradually fell. That faintly discernible figure also became clearer. It was a young man, elegant and heroic. Dressed in embroidered clothes, he walked in the night. The moonlight fell on his face, making him look even more handsome than a mortal. It was as if he was a graceful immortal who had walked out of some Cheonglai fairyland, indifferently overlooking the mortal world. Today, Jiang Yuan was wearing a bright red dress with a thin quilt. The hem of the dress was long and slashed down, dragging out a winding scene on the ground. It was also embroidered with large golden flowers. In an instant, it actually dazzled people. Moreover, her appearance was beautiful and alluring. In the dim light of the night, it was even more enchanting. In the air, there seemed to be a stray cat meowing softly. Jiang Yuan's appearance was beautiful and alluring. Her red dress was like fire. She was graceful, yet she gave off a layer of austere aura. She said, "What matter does Wang Ye have to pay a visit in the middle of the night?" The young man's black clothes were like brocade. His appearance was elegant and heroic. He lowered his eyes and said indifferently, "The daughter of Duo when General Fu is born with a bewitching bone. I specially came to pay a visit. What does being born with a bewitching bone count for? Why don't Wang Ye find a bronze mirror and look inside for yourself? Only then will you know what is called a natural evildoer." Jiang Yuan said coldly. After she finished speaking, she did not wait for the other party to reply. She turned around and returned to the house. With a pang sound, she closed the door. The face of the cold and cheerless young man, who had remained where he was, suddenly showed a trace of a crack. Her guts had grown fat, and she actually slammed the door. It was one of the imperial bodyguards who stretched out his hand. Xiao Xiao looked at him with an unfriendly expression. Jin San's legs turned to jelly as he whispered, "Master, this won't do. Young madam will definitely not forgive you." Sure enough, she was still angry. Xiao Xiao pursed his lips. His gaze towards the door suddenly became somewhat at a loss. Chapter 229. Xiao Xiao stood silently in the night. After the time it took to burn half an incense stick, the door was slammed open and Jiang Yuan's cold voice sounded, "Still not coming in? AI, young madam is indeed an extraordinary woman with a broad mind and courage." Jin San exclaimed in admiration, "Tolerant and magnanimous, it's really hard to find someone like you." She spoke so happily that she had long forgotten who had said, "Young madam will definitely not forgive you." Xiao Xiao, however, was not in the mood to listen to her random flattery. The moment the door opened, he decisively dashed in. When he entered the room, even Lu Zhu was startled and stammered, Wang Ye. "You can leave first." Jiang Yuan said to her. Lu Zhu looked at Jiang Yuan with some hesitation, but still complied and left. After Lu Zhu left, there were only the two of them left in the room. Jiang Yuan sat down in front of the table and calmly waited for Xiao Xiao to speak first. Xiao Xiao was silent for a moment before he sat opposite her. After thinking for a while, he finally asked, "You know? What do you think?" Jiang Yuan asked in return. Xiao Xiao did not know how to respond. After a moment, he said, "I'm sorry, I didn't inform you beforehand." Jiang Yuan glared at him, "If you had informed me beforehand, how could you have put on such an act? I'm afraid it would have been seen through long ago." Xiao Xiao was stunned when he heard this, then he looked at Jiang Yuan with some surprise, "Then you're not angry?" "I'm angry," Jiang Yuan said coldly. Xiao Xiao was startled again, "Why? You're asking me again?" Jiang Yuan was so angry that she laughed, "Xiao Xiao, your subordinates are people, but is my maidservant not people? Since you're putting on an act, then Jin Heir must also be putting on an act. It's only the two of you, master and servant, that won't be a problem. You must feel sorry for my Lu Zhu. I know that you usually only want to achieve your goal, and you don't need to show any mercy. If you did, then the brocade guard wouldn't need to continue working. But Xiao Xiao, you shouldn't have used these methods on my maidservant. These words were spoken quickly and anxiously. It was obvious that she had hidden them in her heart for a long time. Jiang Ruan's resentment toward Xiao Xiao was also quite deep. After she finished speaking, she waited for Xiao Xiao's reply. Xiao Xiao was slightly startled, and then said, "I didn't order it." Jiang Ruan stared blankly, only to hear Xiao Xiao's voice. Jin did not know about this beforehand and only felt suspicious. That day, he did not report to me and only investigated on his own. Later, after the matter was clarified, he told me. Before that, he had already begun acting with Lu Zhu. You're saying that Jin decided to do this on his own? Jiang Ruan frowned. Xiao Xiao replied, he suspects that there is someone behind Liao Meng, and that person might be related to the southern border. If he were to be forcefully exposed, I'm afraid that Lu Zhu would be in danger. Moreover, the people of the southern border are extremely cunning. If Jin had made even the slightest mistake, he might have killed Lu Zhu in order to achieve the same goal of keeping us at odds. Although these words did not directly plead on Jin behalf, they explained Jin motive for doing so. Xiao Xiao looked at Jiang Ruan. How did you find out? Other than Xiao Xiao and Jin the other embroidered uniform guards did not know about this matter. In order to ensure that nothing went wrong, and also in order not to beat the grass and alert the snake so that they could ascertain the mastermind, they had kept their mouths shut. Naturally, Jiang Ruan could not have been told by anyone, so she could only have pushed it out herself. Jiang Ruan rolled her eyes at him and said, I'm not clear about Jin temperament, but he is very particular about having tender and protective feelings for the fairer sex. As long as he treats women who have no ill intentions, he always leaves some leeway. Moreover, he is used to mingling in brothels, so he has seen all kinds of women's tricks. That Liao Meng is also not a stunning beauty. In my opinion, she is not even as beautiful as the top courtesan in the brothels, so how could Jin have a whole new level of respect for her? This, on the contrary, feels strange. The mastermind indeed had sinister intentions. Now that he thought about it, he had first used Liao Meng to cause discord between Jin and Lu Zhu. Moreover, Xiao Xiao and Jiang Ruan both had a protective temperament, and they had a kind of pride in their bones. Naturally, they would not be willing to admit defeat easily. Once such people became stubborn on the same issue, it would only result in a dispute that was difficult to reconcile. Of all the things in the world, the most difficult to control was the human heart. Once there was a flawed seed, the crack would only grow bigger and bigger. If at this time, some external factors were added at the right time, it was inevitable that there would be a split. Therefore, there was Yao Ninian and Qi Feng. Qi Feng originally had some other thoughts about Jiang Ruan, but because of Xiao Xiao and Jiang Ruan's status, he had hidden those feelings deep in his heart. However, this did not mean that Xiao Xiao was completely without a grudge. Deep down, Xiao Xiao was an extremely strong man. If there was another man who coveted his woman, he would always be unhappy. Moreover, witnessing such a scene with his own eyes was so glaring to the eye. For a person who was prideful in his bones, it was undoubtedly a blow. And Yao Ninian's letter and a piece of clothing made people even more fanciful. In this world, there was nothing more powerful than a woman's groundless delusion. Just by relying on the fantasies in one's mind, Yao Ninian's things were enough to destroy a woman's confidence in herself and her husband. These things seemed unremarkable, but they were like tiny beads that were slowly strung together by an entire string. Finally, they formed a complete series of plans. And the ultimate goal of this plan was to cause Jiang Ruan and Xiao Xiao to fall out. However, no matter how perfect a plan was, there would always be flaws. Moreover, Jiang Ruan herself was an expert in perceiving the human heart, and the human heart was the easiest thing to change. Although the other party's plan was good, he had already made a mistake in the first stage. He absolutely did not expect that Jean Eyre had already become a variable in this game. Jean Eyre was a man who had experienced many hardships with women. Ever since he had joined the embroidered uniform guard, he often had missions to lurk in brothels. Thus, he had already perfected the art of putting on a show. Liao Meng was undoubtedly a good opponent. Her background and relationship with the Huang family were genuine. Moreover, Liao Meng herself was also an intelligent and beautiful woman. All of this had been planned so flawlessly that it was almost difficult for people to doubt it. However, the first stage of the game's plan had been missed, and also the key to the mistake was that others had overlooked Jean Eyre's identity. Jean Eyre's identity was the embroidered uniform guard, and he was the second young master of the Huang family. Perhaps the other party had made a serious and detailed investigation to come to this conclusion, but this understanding was far from enough. Liao Meng was indeed intelligent, but for a man who had stayed in a brothel for so many years, her tricks were not enough. Jean Eyre almost immediately realized that this woman had ulterior motives. However, the acuity of the embroidered uniform guard allowed him to understand that this matter might not stop there. Liao Meng seemed to have an expert guiding her from behind. She seemed to be just a chess piece, and a person who could even move a chess piece like her had to have a meticulous mind. Since this was the case, it was better to go with the flow and see what the other party wanted to do. As they continued to investigate, Jean Eyre discovered something unusual and suspected that this matter had something to do with the southern border. Thus, it was not good for him to act blindly without thinking. In order to protect Lu Zhu and also to confirm his suspicions, he followed Liao Meng's plan and put on a show. Then, he quietly found an opportunity to explain this matter to Xiao Xiao. The pitiful Liao Meng really thought that her methods were brilliant, and that she could easily take down someone like Jean Eyre without much effort. However, she did not know that her every move had long been clearly seen by others. Jiang Wan frowned, but then she thought of another matter and asked, then that night, Jean Eyre and Liao Meng really? This sacrifice is really too great. That night, Jean Eyre did not return to the Fu, and when he returned, he wanted to cancel the engagement with Lu Zhu. The servants in the Fu had discussed this possibility. Jiang Wan had inadvertently overheard it and felt that it was absurd, but now that she thought about it, she still had to ask about it. At least, she could ask this question on behalf of Lu Zhu. Xiao Xiao did not expect that she would still remember this, and he was stunned for a moment before he shook his head and said, "No, Jean Eyre has a way to extricate himself." Jiang Wan breathed a sigh of relief in her heart and said, "Since his body is still clean, it's not like there's no chance." Xiao Xiao. However, Jiang Wan did not let him off. She looked at him from the corner of her eye and said with a smile that was not a smile, "His innocence has been preserved, but what about yours?" "Me?" Xiao Xiao was puzzled by her words. However, he heard Jiang Ruan's unhurried words, "These days, haven't you and Yao Nianyan put on a good show? Did she take advantage of you in any way, or did she beat you at her own game and lose weight?" Xiao Xiao was startled, and a trace of helplessness flashed through his eyes. These days, in order to observe the movements of the Yao family, even he had indeed done some concealment. However, it was not as blatant as Jiang Wan had said. The Yao family was also very clever. They probably understood that if they directly sent him an invitation, it would be too obvious, and he would definitely not go. Therefore, they only used a roundabout way to save the country, and always relied on the Mo Fu or other colleagues Fu that had relations with Xiao Xiao to approach him. Most of the time, Xiao Xiao just watched coldly from the seat and did not say anything. He said, "No, I am clean and honest." Clean and honest. Jiang Wan played with these 4 words, and suddenly said, "What's the matter with the clothes?" She finally asked the key point. Even though she knew that it was an act, the clothes were still an eyesore in her eyes, and she only wanted to cut them and throw them far away. Xiao Xiao was startled. Thinking that Jiang Wan had always been brooding over this matter, he did not know whether to laugh or cry. The matter of the clothes was an accident. That day, someone at the banquet had accidentally tipped over a wine cup and spilled wine on him. He had always liked cleanliness, so after changing his clothes, he had casually thrown it into the banquet. He had forgotten to throw it away, but he did not expect that it would be taken away by someone. Naturally, that person was Yao Niannian. When Yao Niannian's letter and clothes arrived, Xiao Xiao himself was also confused. He called Mo Tsong to ask about it. It turned out that on that day, Yao Niannian had somehow been splashed with water, and someone had conveniently used the clothes that Xiao Xiao had tossed aside to drape them over her body. After Yao Niannian returned to the Fu, she personally washed Xiao Xiao's robes and sent the letter to the Wang Fu. It had to be said that this move was extremely ingenious. Not saying anything was better than 1,000 words. If it were some of the more powerful wives, they would have already started quarreling with their husbands. This kind of confrontation, where there was no trust between husband and wife, would naturally not bring any benefits. It was feared that the relationship between husband and wife would only worsen. Now that he thought about it, the person who had splashed wine on Xiao Xiao at the banquet had also done it on purpose. They had long known about Xiao Xiao's habit of liking cleanliness. Even if Xiao Xiao himself did not forget to change his clothes, he would still have a way to get his hands on them. Xiao Xiao then explained the ins and outs of the matter to Jiang Yuan. When Jiang Yuan heard this, although she still had a dissatisfied expression on her face, her gaze softened. It had to be said that Xiao Xiao's explanation was quite in line with her intentions. At least, the words clean and honest were indeed worthy. However, this was also related to Xiao Xiao's own temperament. Everyone knew that Xiao Xiao was used to being cold and indifferent. Naturally, he would not do anything out of line at the banquet. If he had really spoken gently to Yao Niannian, that would have been very suspicious. Jiang Yuan had only just understood when Xiao Xiao began to ask, "You knew about Jin Er's matter. When did you know that I was acting?" "I knew from the beginning." Jiang Yuan snorted, "You are a person who is protective of your own, but Jin Er and I, you probably also want to protect me. In any case, Jin Er is a man. If you did not have any other intentions towards him, why would you protect him and offend me? It's just that the matter was too abnormal from the beginning. I'm not a fool." Xiao Xiao. Jiang Yuan's words were completely gilding her own face. However, when she thought about it carefully, she could hear the unusual meaning behind it. Xiao Xiao was indeed a person who was protective of his own. If it had been someone else but Jiang Yuan, he would definitely have stood on Jin Er's side. This was a kind of equal trust that a leader had towards his subordinates. Moreover, this subordinate also had brotherly feelings. However, with Jiang Yuan, Xiao Xiao was not the same. Perhaps this meant that he valued a lover over a friend, but how could it not be? The person who had set up this trap undoubtedly understood Xiao Xiao very well. This trap had fully considered Xiao Xiao's character and characteristics, and calculated his reaction to every matter. However, there was only one thing that they had overlooked, or perhaps they were unwilling to admit, and that was that times had changed. Now, the first person that Xiao Xiao wanted to protect was naturally Jiang Yuan. Therefore, when Xiao Xiao had misunderstood Jiang Yuan and become distant, Lu Zhu was suspicious, Lian Qiao was suspicious, and even Tian Zhu was somewhat suspicious. However, the person who had seen it the clearest was Jiang Yuan herself. She clearly understood Xiao Xiao's feelings towards her, so she gave him the same kind of trust. "From the beginning, you have been acting with me?" Xiao Xiao was flabbergasted. Immediately after, he said somewhat awkwardly, "Qi Feng." It was also on purpose. Jiang Yuan calmly said, "Although this matter is very unfair to him, if we are to put on an act, we have to do it properly. If I act like this, they will only feel that their plan is progressing so smoothly. Complacent, they will inevitably give themselves away. As the saying goes, complacent will give themselves away. I am speeding up the exposure of their flaws." Xiao Xiao was slightly startled and did not speak for a long time. Seeing him like this, Jiang Wan frowned and said, "Why aren't you speaking? Do you think that my actions are somewhat inappropriate?" Speaking of this, Jiang Wan also sighed in her heart. She had unscrupulously used every person and thing around her that she could use. This had become a long-standing habit in this lifetime, and it could not be changed in a short period of time. She understood the feelings that Qi Feng had for her. It was not that she did not feel guilty for using such feelings, but no matter how deep the guilt was, it could not compare to her determination to protect her own people. "I just feel," Xiao Xiao shook his head, looked at her and said, "there is also a tacit understanding between you and me." Jiang Wan did not expect him to say this. She was slightly startled and met Xiao Xiao's serious gaze. She did not know why, but her face turned red and she looked away somewhat uncomfortably. Although they were already husband and wife, sometimes the words that Xiao Xiao said could always make people blush and their hearts beat faster. When a serious person said sweet words, it always made people particularly happy. She had to admit that at this moment, Jiang Ruan's mood was like the moon radish flowers blooming in the dark night outside, slowly filled with a sweet fragrance. But what did Xiao Xiao say just now? Tacit understanding? Jiang Wan lowered her eyes and her gaze fell on the youth in black opposite her. Indeed, the arrangement of this elimination was indeed ingenious. Even if Jiang Wan saw it herself, she had to admit that the other party had put in a lot of effort. It seemed to be an extremely inconspicuous matter, and there was nothing special about it, but the turning point was inevitable, causing people to be led by the nose and walk into the trap. Jiang Wan was also an expert in guessing people's minds. This elimination took advantage of the weakness of human nature and the distrust in their interactions to expand infinitely. However, this ingenious plan was seen through from the beginning, and now it was just a joke. Why was this so? Naturally, it was because of the tacit understanding between them. Jiang Wan and Xiao Xiao actually did not inform each other in advance. Both sides did not know each other's plans, but by relying on absolute trust and tacit understanding, they completed a flawless performance. Because there was no prior discussion, one could not see any flaws, and only felt that it was incomparably real. This was tacit understanding. While she was contemplating, Xiao Xiao suddenly walked in front of her. Jiang Wan was startled, but Xiao Xiao reached out and pressed her shoulder. He moved closer to her ear and whispered, "Since you are not angry, then follow me back to the Fu." "What Fu?" Jiang Wan said snappily, "Grandfather and the others are all asleep, there is no need to disturb them." "Then go back quietly." Xiao Xiao was unforgiving, "I will carry you and climb over the wall." The dignified Jinying Wang was so fond of climbing over the wall, liked to carry out night raids before marriage, and still liked to do so after marriage. If word got out, people would really laugh their heads off. Jiang Wan said, "Are you not afraid that grandfather and the others will see that I am not here tomorrow morning and report to the authorities?" Xiao Xiao pursed his lips. He could not bring his own wife home. What kind of logic was this? Even if there was such a logic, it would still have to be changed. However, Xiao Xiao could do nothing about this logic, but he could not do anything about Jiang Wan. He knew that Jiang Wan had always been a person of her word, so naturally, there was no room for negotiation. Immediately, he said, "That's good, then I will not leave tonight." Jiang Wan looked at him in surprise, "What are you doing?" "Oh, I miss you." Xiao Xiao said lightly, but he buried his face in Jiang Ruan's neck. Jiang Wan felt a little ticklish and uncomfortable, so she lifted his head. Unfortunately, Xiao Xiao did not move an inch. Jiang Wan was both angry and amused, so she simply ignored him. She had never felt that Xiao Xiao was so clingy. Was it really true that absence makes the heart grow fonder? Thinking of these words, Jiang Ruan's face suddenly turned red again, and she hurriedly interrupted her wandering thoughts, "Are you here to cause trouble for me? Quickly go back and leave before anyone notices." I also want to take a bath, don't laze around without moving. When Xiao Xiao heard this, he immediately let go of Jiang Yuan. Jiang Yuan thought that he had understood her words and wanted to leave, but she did not hear any movement for a long time. Somewhat puzzled, she looked back at him and almost fainted from anger. She saw that Xiao Xiao was unbuckling his belt, and when he saw her look over, the corners of his mouth twitched. Just right, let's go together. Chapter 230. Early the next morning, Jiang Yuan woke up a little late. The servants in the General Fu had received instructions from Madame Li to not disturb her from her sweet dreams. Therefore, by the time Jiang Yuan woke up, the sky was already bright and Xiao Xiao was no longer by her side. The room was so clean that it was as if nothing had happened last night. She slowly propped herself up, only to feel that her whole body was extremely sore and painful, and a few faint red marks could be seen on her shoulders. Jiang Yuan was speechless as she looked at him for a while. Xiao Xiao had not seen her for more than 10 days, but he had become more and more of a beast, and his actions were also very domineering. It really was the so-called absence makes the heart grow fonder. Dewdrop carefully observed her expression. Although she was somewhat reproachful, there was no anger on her face. It seemed that Xiao Xiao's arrival last night had changed her. At least the coldness on her face had disappeared a little. It was probably because the husband and wife had reconciled and the estrangement had been eliminated. This was naturally a good thing. Lu Zhu was also sincerely happy for Jiang Yuan. Unconsciously, she met Jiang Yuan's thoughtful gaze as she stared at her. Dewdrop was startled and asked hesitantly, "Young madam, what do you want this servant to do?" Xiao Xiao stared fixedly at her for a long time, then sighed slightly and said somewhat helplessly, "That's right, the people of the southern border are naturally cunning, once you are involved, it will be hard to avoid danger." Inside the carriage, Lu Zhu and Lian Qiao were somewhat puzzled. Since when did Jiang Yuan intend to embroider the 1,000-armed guanyin? Yao Niannian had not expected that Jiang Yuan would ignore her words just now and suddenly ask for such a request. Governor-General Yao was the Governor-General of Binhai, and he would spend most of the year in the Southern Sea. When Yao Niannian was a child, she had also lived in the Southern Sea. It was only when she gradually grew up that she was sent back to the capital. Such a small matter was naturally not difficult for her. Yao Niannian smiled and said, "There's no need to thank me. Since I have a friendship with His Highness, I am naturally a friend of the princess. I will always want to help my friends. I'll talk to my father when I get home." Just as Jiang Yuan had said, at this moment, in the Yao Fu, the housekeeper by Governor Yao's side looked at Yao Niannian with some astonishment and said, "Miss said that she wants Jia Lin's moonlight stone." Jialin. The South Sea had never heard of Jialin, and what was a moonstone? Is it very famous? He doesn't know any martial arts. Is there anything special about him? Jiang Yuan asked. Naturally, I'm not afraid of any danger. Jiang Yuan glared at him. Suddenly, a trace of craftiness flashed across her eyes as she said, "I more or less know what your plan is, so I helped you start it in advance." Does she know any martial arts? Jiang Yuan's expression was extremely grave. Tianzhu was also slightly surprised, but after carefully recalling, she shook her head and said, "No, but the servant girl beside her has some martial arts, but not much. It should be for self-protection." This wasn't hard to explain. With Yao Niannian's status, she would always bring a few guards with her when she went out. Yao Niannian probably didn't want to bring any guards, so he brought a maid who knew some martial arts. When they returned to the Wang Fu, Steward Lin saw that Jiang Yuan had returned, and once again, he gave a lively celebration. Then, he exclaimed in admiration at the generosity of the General Fu. Indeed, it was young Madame's maiden family. Jiang Yuan was not in the mood to talk to him. She only instructed Steward Lin to tidy up the pile of gifts before she returned to her courtyard. When he arrived at the courtyard, he only asked Tianzhu to go to the study. Jiang Yuan sat in the carriage as it stopped. Tian Zhu was the first to jump down. She looked at the people outside and asked, "Who is it?" Unexpectedly, Jiang Yuan did not answer Yao Nianyan's question. Her face was still smiling, but she asked, "Speaking of which, there is still a matter that I need Miss Yao's help with." Jiang Yuan shook her head and said, "It's nothing." Last night's incident with Xiao Xiao had confirmed her conjecture. Jean Eyre was really just putting on a show. However, Xiao Xiao, she, and Jean Eyre also knew about this show. However, Lu Zhu was the one who didn't know. What kind of feelings did Lu Zhu have for Jean Eyre? Other people's lives and feelings could not be decided by her. Thus, how this matter was resolved would depend on Jean Eyre and Lu Zhu themselves. Jiang Yuan sighed softly and said to Tian Zhu, "Pack up your things. Today, we will return to the Fu." Lian Qiao didn't say anything more. The carriage moved slowly, but it moved very steadily. When they reached the streets of the city, they heard a clear and melodious female voice coming from outside the carriage. "May I ask if this is Hong and Juanzhu's carriage? Return to the Fu?" Tian Zhu was somewhat startled. Although she knew that the two of them must have reconciled last night, why would they suddenly return to the Fu? Jiang Yuan only said, "It's nothing, it's better to catch them off guard." She then got up and went out the door. "I will go explain to grandfather and grandmother." "What?" Tian Zhu was shocked and whispered, "If she isn't Yao Nianyan, who is she?" Yao Nianyan smiled and said, "No need to thank me. But looking at Juanzhu's appearance, did you just come back from the General Fu?" "I met Yao Nianyan today," Jiang Yuan said. The person outside was just a young lady dressed like a servant girl. From the cloth that the girl was wearing, it could be seen that her family background was not ordinary. However, that servant girl did not expect that a woman with an icy expression would suddenly jump out from inside and impolitely ask who she was. She was startled. She composed herself and was about to speak when a gentle voice came from beside her, "It's me." My servant girl was rude and offended Junju. I hope that Junju will be magnanimous enough to forgive me. Just now, I saw the General Fu's carriage and guessed that Junju was also in it, so I rashly went up to greet you. Jiang Yuan called Lian Qiao and Lu Zhu in to freshen up. When Lian Qiao was combing Jiang Yuan's hair, she looked a little embarrassed. Jiang Yuan saw her appearance and asked, "What's wrong?" "This." Tian Zhu was somewhat puzzled. "What is young Furen asking?" "Nothing, I will return to my room first." Yao Nianyan suddenly said in a low voice. For the first time, there was no smile on her face, only coldness. When she returned to her room, Yao Nianyan sat in front of the dressing mirror. She stared at the woman in the bronze mirror and muttered to herself, "A trap." She actually saw through it. She sighed, and with a light flash in her sleeve, something floated out of the window, leaving behind a burst of orchid fragrance. When Madame Li heard that Jiang Yuan suddenly wanted to leave, she was naturally shocked. For the past 10 days, the Zhao family had been very happy because of Jiang Yuan's arrival. Although Jiang Yuan's character was not very warm, she was very good at making good relations with people. In her previous life, she had also learned a lot from Xianli in the palace. Now, with the Zhao family, who had always been kind to her, she had it at her fingertips. Therefore, the Zhao family had long regarded her as a member of the family. To leave so suddenly, there was no need to say anything about other people, but Madame Li was naturally reluctant. However, Jiang Yuan only said that Xiao Xiao had come to urge her, so Madame Li naturally could not stop her. The young couple was doing well, how could they stay at their maiden home every day? There was no need to alienate the affection between husband and wife. Therefore, Mrs. Li smiled and said, "That being the case, it's not good for me to say anything. I will ask the housekeeper to bring the gift back and also bring some for that child Xiao Xiao. Perwan, you should come to the general's mansion in the future. This is your home, grandmother wants you to come." Yao Nianyan stood motionless, his gaze following the direction of the carriage's departure. A trace of darkness flashed in his eyes. What did the phrase, "there are still many matters to be dealt with in the Fu," represent? Was it the supreme authority of the master in Jining Wang Fu? Or was it a demonstration? Yao Nianyan slowly lowered his head. On his face, there seemed to be no difference from the smile he had just had. Maintaining his indifferent appearance, he said, "Let's go. There is no need for me to expose her. She can no longer use this identity. And in such a short period of time, it is not so easy to find the identity of a family member of a high-ranking official who can be close to the center of the court." Jiang Wan glared at him, but did not dwell on this issue. She had not been in the Fu these past few days, so even if Xiao Xiao wanted to tell her, he could not. Thus, she said, "Previously, I felt that it was a little strange. It was probably intuition. I always felt that she was very different from the first time I met her, so when I saw her on the street today, I deliberately tested her." Jiang Wan recounted the matter of asking Yao Nianyan to help her find the moonlight stone on the street, and then said, "That Jialin was just a place that I randomly made up. There was no such thing as a moonlight stone, but she actually agreed." Obviously, she was very unfamiliar with the South Sea region. Yao Nianyan had followed Governor General Yao to work in Binhai since he was a child. How could he not be clear about such a small matter? There must be something wrong with her. Jiang Ruan's gaze sank, and she slowly said, "Let me guess, she is from the southern frontier." Jiang Wan was stunned for a moment when she saw his worried expression, and then she immediately pulled him into the room and closed the door. Xiao Xiao quietly let her do all this. When Jiang Wan pulled him to the study table to sit down, he unhurriedly poured a cup of tea for Jiang Wan. "Speak slowly. It just so happens that maternal grandmother's birthday is approaching, and I intend to embroider a figurine with 1,000 hands for rent. However, that figurine must be made with beads. I heard that the Jialin area of the South Sea is rich in moonlight stones, which are used to polish the beads. However, recently, there have been no such beads in the shops in the capital. I know that Yao Darren is the governor of Binhai, so the next time you go to the South Sea, can you bring some for me? I will be very grateful." Jiang Wan smiled slightly and interrupted what he was about to say, "No need to say more, I have already decided. If the southern frontier colludes with Xianli, sooner or later, Xianpei will also be affected. I can't let this happen." Xiao Xiao was slightly startled, as if he was trying to figure out the meaning of Jiang Ruan's words, and then said, You want to expose her?" Xiao Xiao asked. Tian Zhu shook her head, "I didn't discover anything." "Why does young madam ask this? Miss Yao is just an ordinary young lady, how could she know martial arts?" There had always been a lot of intelligence in the embroidered uniform guard, and Yao Nianyan was also one of the top young ladies in the capital. Everything about her was naturally known by everyone. With such a Yao Nianyan, why would Jiang Wan suddenly ask if she knew martial arts? Tian Zhu was puzzled, but she saw Jiang Wan slowly lower her head and say, "She is not Yao Nianyan." It was like punching cotton, and no amount of strength could be exerted. Any words that could anger others, when it came to Jiang Wan, did not seem to care at all. Watching the carriage go far away, the servant girl beside Yao Nianyan indignantly said, "Miss, she must have done it on purpose." In her heart, she must have been very angry, but on the surface, she pretended to be calm and indifferent. "It must be so. Miss, it would be better if you changed your clothes." Lian Qiao's face was red as she looked at the back of Jiang Ruan's neck. Seeing that Jiang Wan was still somewhat at a loss, she lowered her head and fetched a bronze mirror to look at Jiang Ruan's back. She saw a dark red mark on her fair neck, which appeared extremely ambiguous. Jiang Wan was stunned, and immediately, she rained down a torrent of curses on Xiao Xiao in her heart. Only then did she let Lu Zhu fetch a piece of clothing with a vertical collar that could cover up the red mark on the neck. There were 2 carriages in total, one for Jiang Ruan, and the other for the ceremonial carriage. To follow the ceremonial carriage, Jiang Ruan's carriage also moved slowly. Originally, the General Fu and Jining Wang Fu were not too far apart, so the distance was several times longer than the original. Lien Xiao suggested, "Why don't young madam go first, and the carriage behind will slowly catch up. In broad daylight, no one will be able to snatch the carriage away." Lu Zhu frowned as she listened. This Yao Niannian kept talking about clinging to Xiao Xiao. What was going on? These words deliberately caused Jiang Wan to misunderstand. Lu Zhu could not help but feel a little nervous. She thought that Jiang Wan and Xiao Xiao had finally buried the hatchet with great difficulty last night, and today, this Yao Niannian had come to make trouble again. Lien Xiao held on to Lu Zhu, lest she lose her rationality and rush out. After all, she needed to be more calm, but even so, she did not dare to agree with Yao Niannian's words. Yao Niannian hung his head, as if he had thought of something, and said in a low voice, "No wonder those days, he." Halfway through his words, Yao Niannian suddenly raised his head to look at Jiang Wan, as if he had suddenly realized that there was something wrong with his words, and hurriedly shut his mouth. Halfway through his words, it made people's hearts itch. However, this obviously fell through for Jiang Wan. She still did not seem to see Yao Niannian's expression, and only smiled. "If there is nothing else, I will leave first. There are still many things to do in the Fu, and when I return, I will have to deal with them. If Miss Yao wishes to continue strolling, I hope that you can enjoy yourself to the fullest." Tianzhu followed Jiang Wan into the study, and Jiang Wan walked to the table and sat down. Tianzhu hesitated for a moment before asking, "What happened to young Furen? For her to go in alone, there must be something important." In the end, Jiang Wan just looked at her and said, "Just now, that Yao Niannian, what do you think?" She always brought the matter to Xiao Xiao, but Jiang Wan was not the slightest bit angry. Instead, as if she did not hear the hidden meaning in Tianzhu's words, she smiled and said, "Thank you very much, Miss Yao." Tianzhu was also very efficient, and in less than 2 hours, Xiao Xiao returned to the Fu. He must have rushed back from outside, and he did not even have time to change his clothes. When he saw Jiang Wan, he asked, "What happened?" Jiang Wan shook her head and said, "It's nothing, you can slowly return." These past few days in the General Fu, she did not observe the surroundings like she did in the Wang Fu. Instead, she sent letters to Xian Pei, so the news had lagged quite a bit. Unlike Xiao Xiao, who used the embroidered uniform guards to gather information, Jiang Wan used her own eyes to deduce the possible abnormalities based on the bits and pieces of her daily life. Jiang Wan laughed again, but when she saw the horse carriage that the General Fu had prepared, she was stunned. That horse carriage seemed to be pulling an entire carriage full of gifts. Indeed, Li Shi had given her almost everything that she could think of. She did not dare to refuse the gifts of an elder, but she could not return them all. Jiang Wan did not know whether to laugh or cry. So many gifts, how was this the usual return gift for a visit? It was more like a move. Tianzhu was somewhat hesitant. "Young Furen, I'm afraid the carriage will move very slowly." "Exactly." Jiang Wan also answered. The teacup in Yao Niannian's hand fell, and her expression suddenly stiffened for a moment. The servant girl beside her jumped in fright, and hurriedly squatted down to pick up the broken pieces of the teacup. The housekeeper saw that Yao Niannian's expression was not right, and asked anxiously, "What's wrong with Miss? Why don't this old servant send someone to ask again? Perhaps it's just that this old servant's talent is shallow, and I don't know the reputation of the Moonlight Stone." Yao Niannian's expression changed slightly, and she immediately smiled, "If I can help Junju, I will naturally do my best." The servant girl on the ground, however, knew the cause of the matter, and angrily said, "Taking an item that is simply impossible for Miss to find, that Jining Wangfei is really black-hearted. If Miss can't find it, won't she have something to criticize?" She did not notice that something was wrong. "The matter is somewhat thorny, Jiang Wan suddenly said, "Think of a way to find Xiao Xiao, and let him return to the Fu earlier, there is something important to discuss." These words were spoken very amiably, without any airs, as if she was talking to an old acquaintance. After a moment, the curtain of the carriage was lifted, and Jiang Wan walked out. Tian Zhu stood beside Jiang Wan, and together, they looked at the woman in front of them. This woman was none other than the Yao family's young miss, Yao Ninian. Jiang Wan also smiled. "What a coincidence, I did not expect to meet young Miss Yao here, it can be seen that we are really fated." Yao Ninian also nodded and smiled, "Yes." Ninian suddenly came forward to disturb, and did not want to be too rash and impolite, it was really thoughtless. "It's just that we have met a few times, and thought that we should at least greet each other." N. Xiao Xiao raised his eyebrows, only to hear Jiang Wan speak again, "I suspect that she is not Yao Ninian." Seeing that Xiao Xiao did not respond, Jiang Wan was a little puzzled, but immediately understood, and angrily said, "You already knew." In the carriage, Lu Zhu and Lian Xiao indeed did not dare to make a sound, because Jiang Ruan's expression was very solemn since she had boarded the carriage. This was somewhat rare for her, who usually faced everything with a smile. Lu Zhu and Lian Xiao did not know the reason, and only thought that Jiang Wan had been angered by Yao Ninian again. In their hearts, they could not wait to immediately drive Yao Ninian out of the capital. How could there be an unmarried woman who stared at someone else's husband all day long? The Yao family's status would never allow Yao Ninian to come to the genie Wang Fu as a concubine, but Yao Ninian's current attitude was clear as day. She basically had the goal of entering the household. Could it be that she still wanted to be on equal footing with Jiang Wan? Lian Xiao and Lu Zhu were still thinking, only to see that Jiang Ruan's expression had become even more solemn, and they did not even dare to ask. "Don't be angry." Seeing that she was about to get angry again, Xiao Xiao hurriedly strangled Jiang Ruan's anger in the bud, and comforted her. "Previously I had my suspicions, but now it is almost confirmed." "How do you know?" He changed the topic. "You're tuning into the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.